Chapter 471. Surrounded by the sea, Dragon Island was always beautiful. It was like spring all year round, with sunshine and beaches. It could be said to be the most beautiful place in the Noah continent. Library 56 asked curiously, "Sharon, what's so urgent?" Miss, great news." Sharon was out of breath from running. "I heard from some people in the kingdom of Moran that young Master Moody has been found." "What?" Hearing this, Beatrice's beautiful eyes suddenly widened. She quickly walked up and held Sharon's hand tightly. She said in surprise, "Is what you said true?" "It's true." Sharon was also excited. "I just got the news. It said that Prince Pluto has recognized him. He's now the Prince of the Kingdom of Moran." "Moody!" Beatrice made a gesture excitedly. It was a gesture of respect to the gods. "Omnipotent God, your glory shines on the earth. Thanks to your protection, my son, Moody, has finally been found." "Congratulations, miss." Sharon was also very happy. After the excitement, Beatrice quickly calmed down. She thought for a while, turned around and paced a few steps. She hesitated and said, "Is this Moody real? Could it be some people impersonating him again?" "It shouldn't be," Sharon said quickly. "I also heard it from Queen Latte of the Kingdom of Moran. When Prince Ron of the Kingdom of Moran and Lord Pluto recognized each other, he took out a token. Beatrice thought for a while. "Is it that six-shaped pendant?" "Yes." Sharon answered affirmatively. "That's right." Beatrice finally breathed a sigh of relief. She smiled. "I also believe that Pluto won't recognize the wrong person." The master and servant were happy for a while. Beatrice thought for a while and asked, "Wait, you just said, that prince is called Ro. Ro what?" "Ron." Sharon added. Beatrice frowned. "Isn't his name Moody? Why is he called that?" "Moody is the name of a powerful hero from the primordial dragons." "This," Sharon said. "Her Majesty Queen Latte told me that Lord Pluto wanted him to use the name Moody, but he refused. He wanted to be called Ron. I heard that it was a name given to him by his grandfather who adopted him. But his grandfather passed away a long time ago." Sharon added. "If that's the case." There was a hint of regret in Bellis's voice. "Forget it, he can be called whatever he likes. No matter what his name is, he's still my son." "Yes." Sharon smiled. "Young Master Ron is Mrs. Son. This will never change." Bellis and Pluto's marriage had never been recognized by the chief of the dragons, who was also her father, R.A. Firth. Even though she had children, she was still considered single among the dragons, so Sharon had always called her Mississippi. In the eyes of the dragons, even though Bellis had a disgraceful past, she was still loved by many of her people. Some of them even started to pursue her passionately. "By the way, how is Ron doing now? Has he grown any taller? By the way, is he a human? Has he become a powerhouse? Or an ordinary person? If he's a powerhouse, what's his profession? A knight? A magician?" Bellis asked rapidly. She wanted to know about her son too much. Chapter 472. The team walked forward slowly, and they had already arrived at a high point with sand dunes. After walking for an unknown period of time, Lin wiped the sweat off her forehead, looked back, and snorted coldly. "Those guys are actually still following us. If they piss me off, I'll kill them one by one." Ron said helplessly, "So what if they're following us? The other plane is so big, can't we just walk around?" Behind the team were more than 10 humans. They were Reynolds and his guards. After being separated from his father, Ram, and being rejected by Kadena, he was thinking about how to coax his fiancée back. Reynolds and the others had been following them for more than 10 days, and they just kept following them from afar, refusing to leave. Lin smiled and gently tapped Ron's head. "You are just too kind. If others don't provoke you, you won't want to fight with them. I don't understand, why would a kind-hearted person like you learn those evil necromancy magic? Ron touched his chin and said with a smile, how I am as a person has nothing to do with my power. At this time, Lin reached out and touched him. She smiled mysteriously and whispered, tell me honestly, have you ever had feelings for her? Who? Ron obviously knew what she was asking, so he simply played dumb. Lin said unhappily, do you have to say it so clearly? That female magician. This. Ron looked a little embarrassed. Why are you asking this? No reason, I just want to know. Lin giggled. Just tell me, I won't be jealous. This kind of. Ron stammered. In fact, he already had feelings for Kadena. Ah, you really? Lin shouted exaggeratedly. Shoo, whisper. Ron hurriedly covered her mouth. He glanced at Kadena guiltily. Although Kadena was walking in front, her ears were very sharp. She heard every word of the conversation between the two. Instantly, her face turned crimson, and her heart thumped non-stop. Kadena gently pressed her burning cheek. This Ron, what nonsense is he talking about? After walking for some time, Lin suddenly stopped. Her cute little nose twitched slightly, and her eyes showed a trace of seriousness. Lin, what's wrong? Ron asked curiously. Lin said in a low voice, the city of living corpses is not far ahead. I will never forget this strange atmosphere for the rest of my life. Ron looked around. Sure enough, the surrounding scenery changed unconsciously. In front of them, there was a boundless black forest. In the forest, a strange and gloomy atmosphere drifted around, and the air was filled with a rotten smell. Everyone, including the magical beasts, frowned. Kadena's stomach churned, and she almost vomited. Ron took a deep breath and said, this is the smell of rotten corpses. For some reason, Ron didn't feel any discomfort. On the contrary, it was very pleasing to the eye, as if he was born to adapt to this environment. Yes, it's here. After passing through this forest, we will arrive at the city of living corpses. Lin said to Ron. We have arrived at the city of living corpses. Everyone, be careful. Lin raised her voice to remind everyone. Although she was powerful, they still couldn't let down their guard because this place was too strange. Everyone shuddered at the same time, raising their spirits to 120%. Woo-woo, a breeze blew, and a mournful sound was heard. It was like thousands of ghosts were howling, and everyone was horrified. Tightly holding the broken blood-red skull flag in his hand, Ron took a deep breath, and his eyes were very determined. Scourge Church, I'm coming. The team strode into the forest. This is the city of living corpses? Seeing the magical beasts in front of them disappear into the forest, Renaud stopped and asked. It should be, Master Renaud. This place seems very strange. Should we follow? A guard asked weakly. He didn't realize that his voice was trembling. Renaud also found it difficult to make up his mind. They originally came for the treasures of the city of living corpses, but after arriving at the city of living corpses, they began to hesitate. Not to mention anything else, this place called the city of living corpses was too strange. Before entering the forest, they could already feel a gloomy and terrifying aura, which gave them an invisible psychological pressure. Coupled with the name City of Living Corpses, it added a sense of mystery and fear. The unknown was the most terrifying thing. All the guards looked at him, waiting for him to make a decision. Renaud thought for a moment, then raised his head to look at the strange forest. He gritted his teeth and said, "Follow them." We have no way out now. Renaud knew in his heart that it was not safe to go back now. Along the way, the magical beasts of the sacred domain led the way, so the situation was a little better. If they were alone, there was no guarantee that they would be eaten by the exotic beast. At the thought of those tide-like 7th and 8th level exotic beasts, Renaud's heart trembled. There was no other choice but to follow them. Renaud and his group walked into the gloomy forest, trembling with fear. The forest was extremely dark, and the red sun in the sky could not shine in at all. The inside and outside of the forest were like two different worlds. From time to time, a few crows would fly up, adding to the gloominess. Spectre. Ron stretched out his hand and quietly summoned the spectre, in necromancy magic, to explore the way. Who knew that as soon as the spectre rose, it plunged into the darkness? How can this be? Ron was greatly surprised. He found that there seemed to be some kind of force blocking the way ahead. His spectre could not see the path ahead at all. Wisps of strange black gas drifted over like a fog, covering the sky and the sun. As if sensing something, the surroundings suddenly became completely dark. This is... Ron suddenly raised his head, his eyes focused, and his pupils widened. Curtain of Darkness was the name of a necromancy magic array. He had heard of it from Grandpa Homelin, but he did not expect to see it with his own eyes today. All of this made Ron even more certain that the city of zombies was closely related to the Scourge Church. The deeper they went, the thicker the black gas became. It was almost impossible to see their own fingers. Ron was fine, and with some tricks of necromancy magic, he was able to move through the darkness with ease. However, the vision of the others was greatly affected. Just then, there was a scream from behind. The scream was filled with panic. Kadena. Ron recognized Kadena's voice immediately. Without another word, he swung his arm and ran in the direction of the sound. Ron quickly arrived at the scene of the incident. When Kadena saw him, she stumbled over and threw herself into his arms. Her delicate body could not help but tremble. It was obvious that she was very frightened. "What's wrong?" Ron gently hugged her body and asked softly. There was something there. Kadena's eyes were filled with intense fear. She pointed a trembling finger behind her. "Just now, it seemed like something grabbed my leg. Is there such a thing?" Ron was shocked. He opened his eyes and looked over, but there was nothing there. He didn't find anything. "There's nothing there." Ron scratched his head. "Is this your illusion?" "No. It's definitely not an illusion." Kadena shouted as if she was frightened. She hugged Ron tightly as if she was clutching at the last straw. "Ron, I'm so scared." "You don't leave me." "Oh, okay." Kadena's delicate body was pressed tightly against his, and the delicate fragrance of the young girl kept burrowing into his nostrils. Ron was somewhat at a loss for what to do. The posture of the two looked very ambiguous. This bastard. This scene was seen by Reynolds, who was behind him. His eyes were so jealous that it looked like they were about to spit fire. You bastard, how dare you hug my fiancée? Good. I'm going to kill you. I'm definitely going to kill you." Reynolds's eyes were filled with surging murderous intent. He suddenly pulled out his sword from his space bag and walked toward Ron without saying a word. Dong! At this moment, Reynolds's foot seemed to have kicked something, causing him to almost fall. Reynolds looked down and was quite frightened. He saw that under his foot was a highly decomposed corpse. This corpse was half buried in the ground, revealing half of its body and an incomplete face. Looking at it in the dark, it was particularly frightening. So it's a corpse. Damn, it scared me. Reynolds cursed. He took a step forward and was about to settle the score with Ron. At this moment, something strange happened. The corpse suddenly opened its eyes and stretched out its hand to grab Reynolds's ankle. "Wah!" Reynolds cried out. Fear stimulated the potential in his body. His body exploded with a powerful fire attribute half-chi. He raised his sword high and stabbed the corpse on the ground. The mournful sound echoed in the dark forest. Ron and Kadena turned their heads in confusion. Once, twice, thrice, after stabbing for an unknown period of time, the corpse finally stopped moving. Only a rotten hand was still grabbing onto Reynolds's ankle. Young master! Young master! The guards then regained their senses and remembered their duty. Suppressing the fear in their hearts, they quickly rushed in Reynolds's direction. With great difficulty, Reynolds finally removed those disgusting palms from his boot. When he saw those guards appear, he was so angry in his heart that he only heard a paw sound. The guard who was running at the front was ruthlessly slapped in the face. Reynolds jumped up and scolded fiercely, "Damn it! I usually spend so much money to feed the dogs. You pornographic novels! Bastard, you're only willing to come now. Young master!" The guard who was slapped covered his face and felt extremely wronged. He was already the fastest one. If he knew this would happen, he would have run at the back. Walla walla. Chapter 473. What is this? Reynolds was stunned. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Those highly decomposed corpses that had been asleep for God knows how long had actually come back to life? Ugh! Those living corpses were dressed in rags and held rusty weapons in their hands. They mumbled incoherently as they walked over step by step. With every step they took, countless maggots fell out of their black eye socket. It was extremely horrifying and disgusting. The corpses moved extremely slowly. Just as Reynolds was slightly distracted, one of the corpses in front pounced forward without warning. Its speed was more than 3 times faster than before. "Be careful!" Cadina was still soft-hearted and couldn't help but cry out. Reynolds jumped in fright. In the blink of an eye, that disgusting corpse was already in front of him. It was too late to dodge. The corpse swung down its heavy sword and Reynolds immediately closed his eyes. With a screech, the heavy sword swung down and a flash of blood appeared. In front of Reynolds, a person's eyes were wide open with fear. A trace of blood slowly flowed down his forehead. Miskin! Reynolds's eyes immediately turned red. That Miskin was the guard he had just slapped. In this critical moment, he appeared in front of Reynolds without any regard for his own safety and blocked the fatal blow. "Miskin, how are you?" Reynolds hugged Miskin and roared. Miskin's vitality was already depleted. It was obvious that he wouldn't be able to survive. He held on to his last breath and said in a weak voice, "Young master, Reynolds, hurry, leave Miskin." Reynolds shouted. Miskin's head tilted to the side. He had already breathed his last. "Don't worry, I will take good care of your family." After saying this, Reynolds put down Miskin's corpse and suddenly raised his head. Flames of fighting aura suddenly erupted from his body. He pulled out his sword and shouted, kill these disgusting corpses for me." Renault's sword flashed and split Miskin's corpse in half. "Kill." Following Reynolds's order, his remaining guards also pulled out their swords and rushed towards the revived corpses. Reynolds and his guards were still powerful. They were like crazy and quickly defeated the surrounding corpses. Looking at the chaotic battle behind her, Cadina couldn't bear it. Even though she didn't like Reynolds, he was still her fiancé before the engagement was annulled. Most importantly, he was the guardian of the Doro kingdom. He was Lord Ram's son. If he died here, it would be difficult for her to explain herself. "Ron, should we help?" Cadina hesitantly asked Ron. Her eyes drifted to Di-Lin. She knew that if Di-Lin helped, Reynolds's predicament would be easily solved. Before Ron could answer, Di-Lin smiled. "I'm afraid our troubles have come." Ron focused and saw countless corpses crawling out from the ground around them. They were densely packed, as if they were surrounded by an army. In the blink of an eye, the area around them had turned into a sea of corpses. This was a graveyard of corpses. "Do it," seeing that the situation was critical, Di-Lin ordered. Her body flew out like a swallow. She waved her white hand and an extremely cold aura enveloped the area. In an instant, the surrounding temperature dropped to freezing point, greatly reducing the movement speed of the corpses. Roar! Under Di-Lin's order, the 1,000 illusion ice wolves began to transform. They turned into huge white wolves that were taller than a person. At the same time, they fiercely released high-grade ice magic. Skeleton warriors. Ron didn't stay idle either. He summoned several dozen skeleton warriors in one breath, as well as a large number of skeleton archmages. They pressed down on the living corpses like sharp knives. The skeleton army and the living corpse army fought fiercely. Countless corpses fell to the ground, but countless more crawled out from the ground. There was no end to it. Crash! The skeleton warriors were split in half by the living corpses. After breaking through the wall formed by the skeleton warriors, the living corpses charged towards the skeleton archmage army. Ron also keenly discovered that these corpses were extremely powerful. A single corpse was enough to withstand the attacks of 3 or 4 skeleton warriors. Moreover, they also had a certain amount of magic resistance. The skeleton archmage spells had very limited effect on them. Ron had summoned many skeletons, but there were even more corpses. Moreover, the corpses were much stronger than his skeletons. His advantage was completely nullified. Ron finally tasted the feeling of being surrounded by a sea of people. Damn it! Ron fiercely cursed. He had no choice but to summon a large number of skeletons to assist in the battle. Kadena concentrated on releasing water magic. The 1,000 illusion ice wolves weren't idle either. They gathered together, and under Ebidu's command, all of them released a large number of icicles at the same time. A large number of corpses fell in an instant. However, the corpses didn't seem to feel any pain. Their bodies were already riddled with holes, and they continued to pounce. There was an endless stream of corpses. The fearless corpses launched wave after wave of attack. The magical beast squad could only bitterly hold on. They were like a boat in the middle of the ocean, about to capsize at any moment. On the other side, Renaud and his guards, who were the weakest, were quickly overwhelmed by the sea of corpses, and were utterly defeated. The corpses wore tattered mercenary outfits, and held all kinds of weapons in their hands. Although they moved slowly, they suddenly sped up the moment they attacked. Every time they attacked, they used their full strength, giving Renaud and his guards a headache. At this time, a miserable cry came from afar. Reynolds's heart suddenly trembled. It turned out that one of his guards had been killed by a living corpse. He turned around and saw that there were only 4 or 5 of his guards left. The situation was extremely bad. The remaining guards retreated to Renaud's side. Their swords were pointed at the corpses in front of them. Their eyes were filled with fear, and their bodies couldn't help but tremble. At this time, they were surrounded by dozens of corpses. "Sir Renaud, you... Look. He... A guard said with a trembling voice. "What's wrong?" Reynolds asked in annoyance. He turned around to look and his gaze froze. "Miskin!" Reynolds cried out involuntarily. The person in front of him was none other than Miskin, who had used his life to save him. At this moment, Miskin's expression was wooden. He stared at everyone with a pair of gray eyes, but his body couldn't help but move. His sword suddenly slashed at Renaud. Clang! A guard blocked Miskin's sword and shouted, "Miskin, are you crazy? You actually dare to attack the young master?" Miskin acted as if he didn't hear anything. He attacked again with his long sword infused with impetus, fighting fiercely with that guard. "This guy isn't Miskin." Renaud finally understood. He gritted his teeth and said, "Miskin is already dead. He was controlled by the evil power of the city of zombies and turned into a terrifying corpse." Renaud wasn't wrong. Miskin waved his hand, and the guards who had just died staggered back to their feet. Just like Miskin, they also had stupefied gazes. These people had already become part of the sea of corpses, and were unconsciously attacking their companions when they were alive. Even though they were already dead, they still retained the martial arts they had when they were alive. What was even more frightening was that the strength of the guards after they died actually increased by leaps and bounds. The guard who was fighting with Miskin was originally about the same strength, but he was defeated in just a few moves. He was stabbed in the arm and was dripping with blood. "Young master, these guys are much stronger than when they were alive. Let's leave quickly." the injured guard said while suppressing the pain. Let's go, let's break out. Renaud also understood the danger they were in. If they didn't leave now, they would all die here. Thinking about how he would be controlled by that evil power after he died and become a terrifying corpse like this, he couldn't help but shudder. As long as I can break out of the encirclement and come to the side of the magical beast squad, I'll be safe, Reynolds thought to himself. Over the past few days, he had also figured out the actual situation of the magical beast squad. He believed that no matter what, Ron would not chase them out when they were in trouble. With just a glance, Renaud's guards immediately understood. Powerful energy erupted from their bodies, and they charged towards the magical beast squad, desperately trying to get close to them. The magical beast squad didn't have it easy either. The strength of the corpses was too strong, and there were too many of them. Ron didn't know how many batches of skeletons he had summoned. Even with the support of the soul ring and stamina potion, he still felt tired. Ron, what should we do? At this moment, Kadena retreated to Ron's side and said, The strength of these corpses seems to be very similar to your strength. Can you communicate with them and make them stop? Impossible, I can't communicate with them at all. Ron shook his head with a thoughtful look in his eyes and said, These corpses are just puppets. The real controller is still hiding behind the scenes. Ron felt somewhat sorrowful. The controller behind the scenes of the city of zombies was much better at controlling corpses than he was. Even the most ordinary corpses had considerable strength. He was somewhat curious about the identity of the owner of the city of zombies. Was this really related to the Scourge Church from 100,000 years ago? Ron, in this case, I don't need to be polite. If this continues, we will die here sooner or later. At this time, Lin's cold voice came from not far away. Since the beginning of the war, she had been thinking that the city of zombies was more or less related to Ron, so she had been holding back. But at this moment, even the powerful magical beasts of the sacred domain had lost their patience. Lin let out a low roar, her hands formed into claws, and an incomparably tyrannical ice energy was released in an instant. In the sky, it was as if a dark cloud had drifted over, and the night instantly shrouded. Countless water droplets rapidly condensed, and between heaven and earth, a fierce wind blew unconsciously. Everyone, be careful. Lord Celestial Wolf is about to use a forbidden spell. Ibidu shouted. All the 1,000 illusion ice wolves looked at the sky, and their faces turned pale. Without saying a word, they turned around and fled. Lin's eyes turned azure, and her robe fluttered in the wind. Her body slowly flew up, and the air was filled with a suffocating smell, as if a storm was about to arrive. Blizzard! Lin shouted, and with a loud bang, the earth shook and the sky seemed to break open. A dazzling ray of light shot down from the sky, and in the blink of an eye, a powerful ice energy fell from the sky. A fierce wind blew on the flat ground, and countless fist-sized hailstones mixed with snowflakes fell from the sky. Within the attack range of the blizzard, all the corpses were frozen into ice sculptures, and the ground was filled with smoke. Blizzard was a water-type forbidden spell. It was very powerful. After the blizzard raged, a large number of corpses on the ground were swept away in an instant. The remaining corpses were frozen stiff and unable to move. In an instant, a path was opened up. Don't fight, let's go. Lin was very clear about the power of the city of zombies. After releasing the forbidden spell, she flew down and pulled Ron away. The 1,000 illusion ice wolves and Kadena also quickly followed. Reynolds's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He was only a few dozen meters away from the magical beast team, but it felt like several kilometers. He used all his strength to kill his way out. Young Master Reynolds! Young Master Reynolds! Don't leave us behind! Reynolds's last 2 guards cried out, desperately struggling. Unfortunately, they had been injured while protecting Reynolds and couldn't move. Chapter 474. Let's go. Lin used Ice Storm to carve out a bloody path, leading Ron, Kadena, and their clansmen away from the sea of corpses. Wait for me. Wait for me. At this time, an anxious voice came from behind. Ron looked back and saw that it was Renaud. At this moment, Renaud's clothes were torn, his hair was messy, and his body was covered in blood. He looked miserable. Lin looked at him with a trace of disgust in her eyes. She did not have a good impression of a coward who abandoned his woman and ran away alone. She frowned and asked, "What are you doing here?" Renaud was somewhat lacking in confidence when facing Lin. "This, Lord Magical Beast. I was separated from the guards. I don't know if it's okay." "No." Lin refused mercilessly. She said coldly, "I think you should also have a taste of being abandoned, Sister Lin." Kadena shouted, her eyes full of pleading. "What? Are you going to plead for this guy?" Lin opened her eyes wide. "This, Sister Lin. Kadena stammered. She did not dare to look Lin in the eyes. Lin sighed. Women were easily soft-hearted. She glanced at Renaud and said seriously, "You can join my team if you want, but you have to listen to my orders. Otherwise—" "Humph," Lin deliberately said with a straight face. Of course. Renaud was overjoyed when he heard that he could live and hurriedly agreed. At this time, he said to Kadena happily, "Kadena, you're finally willing to forgive me?" "Renaud, you're thinking too much," Kadena said lightly. "I just don't want you to die here. It'll be hard to explain to Lord Ram. As for marrying you, don't even think about it in this lifetime." Kadena spat out these words coldly and turned to leave. Renaud was dumbfounded. After passing through the dark forest, they finally saw a glimmer of light. About half an hour later, they finally arrived in front of a huge building. The city of living corpses is just ahead. It's even more dangerous inside, so be careful. Lin warned everyone. In front of Ron was a huge castle. The castle was about the size of 20 football fields. In front of the main entrance of the castle, a huge and ferocious skull stood quietly in the middle, looking down at the earth like the eyes of a devil. However, this skull looked a little strange. On its bald head there were two huge horns. One of them was broken, leaving only one horn standing alone. However, after so many years, such a mark was left behind. Ron tilted his head and looked at it. He felt that he had seen this skull somewhere before. However, he quickly recalled that the huge skull above the undead castle in his soul ring looked exactly like this. When Ron and the others arrived in front of the huge castle, they found that the entrance was already densely packed with people. They were all wearing mercenary uniforms and looked like they had been here for a long time. "What's going on?" Ron asked in surprise. Lin looked for a while. "They don't seem to be able to enter." In front of the huge castle entrance, there was a magic light screen. A faint black light circulated and released a strong defensive power. "Damn it, we can't break it open! This barrier is too strong. What a powerful magic array!" There was a hubbub of voices in front of the castle entrance. All kinds of colorful fighting auras and magic were constantly bombarding the castle entrance. This was the core of the magic array. As long as it was broken, they would be able to enter the castle. The simultaneous attacks of hundreds and thousands of people were quite effective. As more and more magic was used, the black light gradually dimmed. "Come on, it's about to break," the mercenaries shouted crazily, their eyes flashing with naked desire. Of course, there were more people standing behind to watch. There were naturally people who would do the hard work. There was no need for them. "What's going on? The last time I came, the entrance was open. There was clearly no magic array?" Lin frowned. Ron muttered to himself, "I think there must be something we don't know about inside." "Father," at this time, a pleasantly surprised voice came from the back of the group. It was Reynolds. He saw his father, the guardian of the Doro kingdom, Ram, from the thousands of people in the crowd. This wasn't strange at all. A knight riding a huge scorpion sorcerer would always be the focus of attention in the crowd. Ram turned around and looked at Reynolds. He said indifferently, "What's wrong? You're only here now? You seem to be a bit too slow." "Father, it's not like that." Reynolds hurriedly explained and told him about the encounter with the exotic beasts in the Forgotten City. Pornographic novel. After Ram heard it, he nodded. A tide of exotic beasts in addition to the powerful golden flying dragon. Even I would have to retreat. You being able to keep your life is pure luck. He paused and said, "Where's Cadina? She didn't come with you?" Cardina, she. Reynolds began to stutter. He told her about how Cardina wanted to break off the engagement, but left out the part where he didn't save her when she was in trouble. "What? She dares?" Ram heard it and immediately flew into a rage. "The news of your engagement has already spread throughout the Doro kingdom. If she were to break off the engagement, where would I put my face? Call her over right now," Ram said with a heavy tone. At this, Reynolds felt guilty. If his father called Cadina over and asked her, then wouldn't he know everything? Although he might not break off the engagement, he would still be scolded. Ram had already seen through Reynolds's expression and calmed down. "Actually, you two quarreled again, right?" Yes. Reynolds could only nod. "Go. Coax her back properly." Ram waved his hand in annoyance. "You're already so old, yet you still need father to worry about such trivial matters. Eh? Isn't that the guy called Ron?" At this moment, Ram turned his head and saw Ron. It was as if he had discovered a new continent. He was standing beside a beautiful woman and talking about something. This guy also came to the city of zombies. Ram laughed, his eyes flashing with a gloomy, murderous intent. Very good. Let's see how Li Jiao will protect you in this godforsaken plane." After saying that, he jumped down from the poison scorpion master and walked quickly towards Ron. The 1,000 Illusion Ice Wolf clan, including Di Lin, had all changed into human form and looked like an ordinary mercenary group. With Ram's strength, he wouldn't put such a mercenary group in his eyes. He thought that the time for revenge had come. Reynolds came back to his senses and saw that his father had already walked over. He turned pale with fright. "Father, don't," in fact, Ron had already seen Ram coming over. He took a step back and asked warily, "Ram, what are you doing?" Di Lin's eyes narrowed slightly. "Human, stop. I smell a murderous aura from you." Ram laughed wildly. "Ron, go to hell. No one can save you in this other plane. I'll let you know the consequences of offending me." He pulled out a weapon from his space bag and shouted fiercely, "Irrelevant people, get out of my way. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." These words were obviously directed at Di Lin. At the same time, he unscrupulously released the aura of a sacred domain powerhouse. Although there were many mercenaries here, including orcs and elves, none of them dared to meddle in the affairs of a sacred domain powerhouse. In a dangerous place like the city of zombies, even those with the strength of a sacred domain powerhouse had the mentality that the less trouble the better. At this time, Ram had already made his move with lightning speed. "You dare?" Di Lin shouted and appeared in front of Ron like lightning. At the same time, she fiercely attacked. Crack, with a sound, Ram staggered back a few steps. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Just now, he knew that the delicate girl in front of him was several times stronger than him. Roar, with a strong enemy attacking, the 1,000 phantom ice wolves no longer hid. They roared and began to transform. Not long after, more than 10 giant white wolves appeared in front of Ram. "Magical Beast Clan? You're a magical beast from the sacred domain?" Ram, who had suffered a great loss, finally came back to his senses. He complained in his heart. If he knew that the other party was a team of magical beasts and had powerful magical beasts from the sacred domain, he would never have come. At the same time, he secretly cursed his son, Renaud, in his heart. Why didn't you King tell me that there was a magical beast from the sacred domain in the team? Lin stood in front of Ron, her eyes full of murderous intent. She could not tolerate someone attacking Ron in front of her. She coldly said, "Human, I will make you pay for your actions." "Haha, misunderstanding, this is all a misunderstanding." Ram forced a smile on his face. His attitude took a 180-degree turn. The other party was stronger than him. He was bound to suffer this loss. At this time, Renaud hurriedly ran over. "I'm sorry, Lady Lin. My father mistook you for someone else." Without waiting for Lin to reply, he pulled his father up and left. "Why didn't you say that there was a magical beast from the sacred domain?" Ram wanted to settle the score with Ron. Not only did he fail, but he also lost a lot of face. At this time, he could not help but scold his son. Thinking of the other party's terrifying level 15 strength, he felt a lingering fear in his heart. Renaud was full of grievances. He thought to himself, "I didn't have time to say anything, and you rushed up." "Call Kadena back," Ram said in annoyance. He was furious when he saw Kadena standing in the other party's team. Renaud nodded and walked to Kadena's side. He lowered his voice and said something. Kadena was quite stubborn at first, but in the end, she obediently went back with Renaud. Looking at the back of Kadena and Renaud leaving, Ron's facial muscles twitched a few times. A faint sense of loss flashed in his eyes. He did not know why, but he felt very uncomfortable in his heart. "Why? Jealous?" Lin smiled and said, "I can see that you still like her very much." Ron sighed and nodded imperceptibly. "Maybe, I don't know. What's up with that human just now? He looked like he wanted to kill you." Lin snorted and said, "If you hadn't stopped me, I would have rushed up and killed him." Ron was talking to Lin, but he did not know that a pair of eyes had already fixed on him. Those eyes belonged to a young man. He had a hooked nose and a pair of slender eyes that were full of sinister vultures. He muttered to himself, "This guy is Ron? Yes, that should be it. He looks very similar to Beatrice in her human form." The young man smiled sinisterly. I finally found this kid. It was not in vain that I waited for so many days in this disgusting place." After saying that, he strode towards the Thousand Illusion Ice Wolves team. "Excuse me, are you Ron?" Ron was talking to Lin when he heard someone calling him. He turned around and saw a handsome young man of about 27 or 28 years old standing in front of him. He was smiling at him and asked politely, "Yes?" Lin's face flashed with a trace of unease. She did not even notice when this guy came over. Ron was stunned. Although the young man in front of him was smiling, there was a trace of arrogance in his smile. He nodded and replied politely, "I'm Ron. May I ask who you are?" "You don't need to know who I am." The young man interrupted him. "You're Ron. I've been looking for you for a long time." The young man smiled. "Now, you can go to hell." After saying that, he threw a punch at Ron without saying anything. Chapter 475. This was not a fight with Ram. This young man was extremely powerful. Before he arrived, the wind from his fist had already arrived. Lin wanted to save Ron, but it was too late. At the critical moment, Ron reacted faster. He immediately summoned the giant bone shield. Only a boom sound was heard, as if something had exploded in a pornographic novel. Smoke and dust filled the air. One punch. With just one punch, Ron was already injured. The giant bone shield he summoned was shattered by the other party's punch. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Although he could barely stand, his whole body was dispirited. The movement here also attracted a large number of mercenaries to look back. Looking at the powerful force that burst out from the young man's punch, everyone could not help but feel a trace of fear in their hearts. The young man smiled slightly, and there was a trace of approval in his eyes. "Your strength is not bad. You can actually take a punch from me and not die. Ron wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, raised his head and asked, Who are you? Why do you want to kill me? Ron was depressed. What was going on today? It seemed that everyone was against him. However, he did not dare to act rashly. The strength of the young man in front of him was far above his. Lin's small nose twitched a few times, and then her face changed greatly. Your Excellency, are you dragons? Dragons? When the surrounding mercenaries heard this, they suddenly felt a chill. They looked at Ron with sympathy in their eyes. This guy, who could not offend anyone, had to offend dragons. Now he was looking for death even if he did not want to die. Dragons? Ron was slightly stunned. When did he get involved with dragons? The next moment, he reacted. Could it be because of his background? The more Ron thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. He said in a deep voice, Your Excellency, could it be that the dark dragon R.A. Firth sent you to kill me? Lord Patriarch? The young man was slightly stunned and then laughed. How is that possible? Why would Lord Patriarch pay attention to a small character like you? Killing you is my personal decision. The young man turned to Lin, a look of approval in his eyes. Legend has it that a genius with the bloodline of an ancient holy beast has risen in the Thousand Illusion Ice Wolf clan in recent years. In just a few short years, he has advanced to the sacred domain. Looks like it's you. Lin stared at the young man in front of her and asked cautiously, Your Excellency, which powerful dragons are you? The young man smiled and said, There's no harm in telling you. I'm Ranarier from the Fire Dragon clan. Ranarier? Ron frowned. He was sure that he had never heard of this name before. He then said in a deep voice, Since your Excellency was not sent by R.A. Firth, then why are you here? I hope your Excellency can let me know the reason behind my death. Ranarier smiled proudly. I told you, you don't need to know. The only thing you can do is to kill yourself immediately. That way, at least your corpse will be intact. If I do it myself, you will be burned to ashes. Ranarier's words were arrogant and overbearing. However, no one doubted it, because the dragons were indeed qualified to do so. When the surrounding mercenaries heard this, they could not help but shake their heads and sigh. Although they did not know how the black-robed young man had offended the dragons, it seemed that he no longer had the right to live. Thinking of this, they could not help but sympathize with him. Ram, who was watching from afar, sucked in a breath of cold air. From that young man's tone, it seems that Ron has offended the dragons. Reynolds, on the other hand, was gloating. Hee, that's right. Father, this kid actually dared to offend the dragons. He doesn't even know how to write the word death. Ram smiled sinisterly. He asked for it. It's good that he's dead. We can finally vent our anger. Kadena stood beside Reynolds and his son. The conversation between the two fell into her ears. At this moment, she despised Ram. Usually, this person looked dignified, but his character did not seem to be good. However, Kadena did not dare to express her thoughts. She looked at Ron with a worried expression. At this point, it seemed that there was no need to continue. Ranarier only had one goal, and that was to kill Ron. He did not even intend to tell him the reason for his death. Ranarier smiled coldly and took a step forward. Lin stood in front of Ranarier as if it was a conditioned reflex, protecting Ron with her body. Ranarier was a little surprised. He frowned and said with a fake smile, What? You still want to intervene in this matter after knowing my identity? Do your Excellency and your race want to die? Your Excellency Celestial Wolf King, please reconsider. Ibido hurriedly advised. Lord Ranarier is from the dragons. This is not a joke. Ron took a deep breath. Lin, get out of the way. Although I don't know if he was sent by the chief of the dragons, R.A. Firth, to kill me, I should solve my own problems. No. Lin's eyes contained a trace of determination. If you want to kill Ron, you must kill me first. Hearing Di Lin's determined answer, although the surrounding mercenaries did not dare to say it on the surface, they secretly gave her a thumbs up. After all, there were not many races that did not shrink back in the face of the threat of the dragons. In the magical beast continent, the 1,000-phantom ice wolf was only a small race, but their king had the courage to fight against the dragons. Ranaria's face flashed with a trace of anger. He sneered and said, "Since you want to die, then don't blame me. Today, none of your 1,000-phantom ice wolf race will leave. Try it if you have the guts." Di Lin at this time also threw caution to the wind and shouted tit for tat. Ranaria's face darkened. He had said enough, and there was no point in continuing. He gently clenched his fist, and a blazing flame aura instantly filled the air. Di Lin was not to be outdone. She mobilized the surrounding elemental power, and a cold cyclone quickly formed, resisting Ranaria's flame power from a distance. Seeing that the battle was about to start, the surrounding people silently retreated. They did not dare to provoke these two powerful magical beasts. At this time, Ranaria moved. His body turned into a fire shadow, and he suddenly pounced on Di Lin. Ice Sealing Ball. Di Lin's pair of beautiful eyes turned white. She put her hands together, and a round ball appeared in her hands. The ball carried a strong rotation and blasted towards Ranaria. The ice ball scattered, and thousands of icicles scattered. Boom! 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 The earth quaked and the mountains shook. The two powerful magical beasts in their human form burst out with powerful power. For a moment, the sky changed color. Even the black fog floating in the air was scattered by the two powerful elemental powers, one red and one white. Level 15. They are both level 15 magical beasts. Ram was greatly shocked. For the first time, he felt that the power of the sacred domain was like a child's toy in front of level 15 magical beasts. Could not withstand a single blow. The strength of magical beasts came from their powerful physical strength and innate elemental sensitivity. They did not need to chant incantations to mobilize the elemental powers in the sky and on the ground for their use. This was something that humans could never compare with. Looking at Di Lin's figure dancing in the sky, Ron felt a little moved. He had never yearned for power so much. At this time, Di Lin had put aside all her worries and began to counterattack. For a moment, she fought with Ranaria in the sky. Even the mercenaries on the ground could not help but cheer for her. "Who is that woman? She also looks like a magical beast," a mercenary said. "It is said that she is the queen of the 1,000 illusion ice wolves." Another mercenary said. 1,000 illusion ice wolves? They actually dare to fight against dragons? It is said that it is for that human. Another mercenary looked at Ron, who was not handsome, and a trace of jealousy flashed in his eyes. He wondered why he could not find such a beautiful and powerful magical beast as his wife. After fighting for a long time without success, Ranaria became anxious. This wolf girl's strength was far beyond his imagination. He only sneered, growled, and began to transform. Not long after, a blood-red dragon more than 10 meters long appeared in the sky. A powerful pressure from a higher race pressed down from the sky. Plop! Ibid and the rest of the 1,000 illusion ice wolves knelt down. Their eyes flashed with fear. This was the instinctive reaction of a magical beast of a lower race when facing a magical beast of a higher race. Ibidu's entire body trembled. He looked helplessly at the sky and muttered, "Don't fight, Your Excellency, Heavenly Wolf King. I beg of you, please don't fight. Offending the dragon race is truly terrible." Di Lin had the bloodline of an ancient sacred beast, so Ranaria's pressure had no effect on her. At this moment, Di Lin landed on a mountain peak and sneered, "Are you the only one who can transform? Watch me." Di Lin finished speaking, and at the same time, her body also changed. Not long after, she turned into the image of a small white wolf. That's right, it was the small white wolf that Ron saw in the past. Rannerly looked and laughed. Isn't this a low-level magical beast, the Thousand Illusion Ice Wolf? Could it be that your ancient sacred beast bloodline has not been awakened? Or you are not the person I was talking about, no, that wolf? Your Excellency, it is too early to be happy. My true strength has not been revealed yet. A mocking smile appeared on the small white wolf's face. Then, Di Lin's expression changed. An incomparably tyrannical power burst out from that small body. In an instant, a glaring light illuminated the entire sky, as if a huge white lotus had appeared in the sky. At this time, a huge shadow appeared on Di Lin's body, covering the entire sky. That was the image of a wolf. The huge wolf head had a pair of blood-red eyes, looking somewhat similar to Di Lin. The most eye-catching thing was the crescent moon on the forehead of the huge wolf head, emitting a faint light like the moon. Moon-devouring heavenly wolf. When Di Lin revealed her true appearance, Ibid and the others were already lying on all fours on the ground, not daring to raise their heads. The moon-devouring heavenly wolf was not only the king of the Thousand Illusion Ice Wolf clan, but also the master of all wolf clans. How is this possible? Looking at the huge wolf head in the sky and the power behind it, Ranerier was stunned. This power was 10 times stronger than he had imagined, making him somewhat at a loss. Ron's face was also full of shock. Feeling the tyrannical power in the sky, he stammered, Is this really Di Lin? In the sky, the huge moon-devouring heavenly wolf's shadow calmly stared at the small flame wyvern, as if it was looking at a delicious snack. Di Lin coldly smiled. She might as well go all the way. Facing the powerful dragons, this was the first time she wanted to kill them. Di Lin let out a low roar, softly spitting out 2 words. Chapter 476. Rumble. A loud sound reverberated through the sky. It was as if the sky had split open, and power poured down like mercury. The celestial wolf King Di Lin revealed the true face of a moon-devouring celestial wolf for the first time. Ron was dumbfounded. He didn't expect the delicate wolf clan girl beside him to be so fierce when she was angry. Di Lin was indeed furious. She would not allow anyone to hurt Ron, not even the dragons. Moon-devouring was Di Lin's innate skill. The huge virtual wolf head had a powerful devouring power. Everything in the surroundings, including branches and stones, rose up, and even the surrounding space was distorted. Faced with the might of the moon-devouring celestial wolf, even Ranarier's expression turned serious. He said in a deep voice, a very powerful innate skill. However, this alone is not enough to defeat me. There is a reason why we dragons can stand at the peak of the Noah continent. Whoa! Ranarier let out a long howl. He opened his mouth wide and spat out a mouthful of dragon breath. Flaming tornado. The blazing dragon breath was like a tornado, and it swept towards Di Lin. Don't underestimate the small dragon breath. It was enough to melt metal. Rumble. The 2 powerful forces fiercely collided together, exploding out with a loud bang. An incomparably powerful pressure was instantly released, and the pitch-black sky became as bright as day. The battle between the flaming wyvern and the moon-devouring celestial wolf, 2 level, 15 magical beasts from the sacred domain shook heaven and earth. Get out of the way! Their battle is too strong, be careful not to get sucked in. The mercenaries ran and shouted, trying to escape the area of the explosion. In the center of the explosion, a short figure stood there proudly. His clothes and skin were torn by the powerful airflow, and his face was beginning to bleed. Under the pressure of that powerful force, the weak Ron couldn't hold on for much longer. However, he still didn't move. He clenched his teeth and endured. He couldn't retreat. Even though Ron didn't have the strength to fight against the powerful flying dragon, he knew that he couldn't retreat. He had to face it together with Di Lin. The confrontation between the 2 forces continued, and the released power continued to expand. The center of the explosion had become a dangerous area. Ron. At this time, Lin saw Ron struggling in the central area. She was absent-minded for a moment, and her strength was somewhat scattered. Ha ha ha, although you are strong, you are still inferior to me. We dragons are the most talented. When Ranarier saw this, he immediately sped up his attack and crazily squeezed Lin. Not good. Lin had a bad feeling in her heart. In just a moment, the balance was broken, and the two sides that were originally evenly matched began to lose their balance. It's over, Lin thought. Not good, Lin is in danger. Ron was shocked. At this time, there was a slight vibration in the surrounding space, as if something was awakened. Everything around them began to shake slowly. Earthquake! Earthquake! This time, the mercenaries were even more panicked. They ran around like headless flies, and those who could fly rose into the sky. The situation was chaotic. Father, what's going on? Renault's eyes were full of panic. He almost couldn't stand still. Is the power of the two magical beasts influencing each other? Ram, who was riding on the back of the venomous scorpion hammer, quickly calmed down. He quickly observed. No, this seems to have triggered a mechanism of a magic array. Now the magic array is starting to operate. Ram was right. At this time, in the middle of the castle of the city of zombies, the black eyes of the huge skull emitted blue flames. The whole city of zombies seemed to have come alive. Waves of light blue fog were constantly emitted from all directions and constantly gathered. Like a tornado, a powerful energy vortex was formed in the sky above the city of zombies. The two sides in the duel also stopped and quietly looked at the huge dark blue energy vortex in the sky, their eyes full of horror. What kind of power is this? It's terrible, Ranarier murmured. It's much more powerful than the Patriarch. Lin did not speak. The frightened expression on her face said it all. In front of that power, she felt small for the first time. This is... Ron's face was full of excitement. He trembled all over and finally calmed down. He took a deep breath and said, "That's right. This is the divine power of death. The divine power of death, the legendary power of God. It's open, the gate of the city of zombies is open." At this time, there was a burst of cheers among the mercenaries. It turned out that the magic array that sealed the castle of the city of zombies had unknowingly opened. Looking at the pitch-black entrance in front of them, the mercenaries began to hesitate. They didn't know if they should enter or not. These people were blinded by the huge amount of wealth and came to this damned place. But in the face of this strange scene, they began to hesitate. "Come on, you go in first. You go first." What a joke! As the leader, you don't want to go in first. Everyone pushed each other, and no one dared to go in first. They all felt the strangeness of the city of zombies. At this time, a mercenary felt the commotion in the distance and raised his head slightly. The next moment, his face was full of horror. "Look, what is that?" The mercenary screamed and pointed with a trembling finger in the distance. At this time, Ron also felt the strange movement behind him. He turned his head and looked back. In the distance behind them, a large group of people appeared. No, they were not people, but a large group of undead creatures. Walking in front was a large group of disgusting corpses. They moved slowly and held simple weapons. They approached step by step, and their mouths made vague ho sounds. In the second row was a group of short undead creatures. They had huge claws and huge mouths full of sharp teeth. Traces of disgusting mucus seeped out of their mouths and dripped to the ground. Are these ghouls? Ron was shocked. This was the first time he had seen such a legendary undead creature. Homeland's grandfather had told him that ghouls could recover from their injuries by eating corpses, thus becoming even more ferocious and powerful. Then in the third row was a large group of things that looked like spiders. They were 7 to 8 meters long, with a huge skull head and a big black mouth. They dragged their heavy bodies with their huge 8 legs and scrambled to climb out of the ground. What is this? Ron saw a kind of undead creature that he had never seen before, but at this time, he was no longer surprised. If Homelin was here, he would tell him that this was an undead creature called Crypt Demon. It had powerful anti-air abilities and mental attacks, and could also make the enemy feel fear. Ron was so excited that his face flushed. He excitedly clenched his fists. This is the place I was looking for. The number of undead creatures was extremely large. It was impossible to count how many there were. At a rough glance, there were hundreds of thousands of them. Moreover, the undead creatures were continuously rushing to the city of living corpses. So many. The mercenaries were trembling with fear. The sudden number of undead creatures in the army made them afraid. Just imagine what it felt like to be surrounded by hundreds of thousands of undead creatures. This feeling was fear with despair. At this time, in the middle of the vast army of skeletons, a tall and sturdy figure appeared. It was a tall knight dressed in black. He was riding a huge skeletal horse. The weapon in his hand was shining, and it was even more dazzling in the night. Sacred weapon? When Reynolds saw it, his eyes lit up. He excitedly pulled his father's hand and pointed. "Father, look, that person is holding a sacred weapon. It's even a sword. Father, it looks very suitable for you." Ram slightly glanced at the knight holding the sacred weapon and said in a deep voice, "It's a sacred weapon, but that person's strength is at the peak of the sacred domain." The peak of the sacred domain. When Reynolds heard this, he immediately stopped talking. The strength of the peak of the sacred domain was over level 15, much stronger than his father. It seemed that this sacred sword was out of the question. Ram sighed. "Child, in this world, there are many people older than your father. You must always remember this. Don't provoke a powerful enemy that you can't afford to provoke." "Yes, father, I know." Reynolds's heart was filled with shock. Ever since he was young, his father was the sky. When he was in the kingdom of Doro, everyone was very respectful to his father because of his strength. Reynolds had always thought that on the Noah continent, even if his father didn't stand at the peak, he would be among the people who stood at the peak. But at this moment, he understood that he was wrong and extremely wrong. On the Noah continent, the so-called sacred domain was only at the threshold of powerhouses. Not to mention the Black Knight who had the strength of the peak of the sacred domain, even the two level 15 magical beasts fighting in the sky couldn't compare. Death Knight. Ron sucked in a breath of cold air. He wasn't surprised by the opponent's strength, but by the strong aura of death emitted by the Black Knight. It was a corpse, and it was a spiritual corpse that had intelligence. The dense army of the undead approached from afar. The powerful aura made everyone breathless, especially the Death Knight who had the strength of the peak of the sacred domain. As soon as it appeared, all the sacred domain experts in the field dimmed. "Maybe we should stop for now." Ranerier withdrew his power and slowly said. His eyes were calmly staring at the Death Knight in the field with a dignified expression. "As long as you don't look for trouble with Ron, I also don't want to be your enemy." Di Lin also withdrew her power. Ranerier glanced at her and didn't say anything. In his eyes, Ron had to die. Only with his death would Ranerier have a reason to marry Frigga. Ranerier didn't say anything. Di Lin was also well aware that the two of them would fight again sooner or later, but now wasn't the time. The two of them had the same thought and changed their target. The Death Knight slowly approached on its skeletal horse, followed by the undead army of several 100,000. At this time, it suddenly stopped and gently waved its hand. With a swish, the undead army of several 100,000 stopped as if they had heard an order. Everyone watched quietly without moving. They didn't even dare to breathe. The number of the undead army was too terrifying. At this time, the Death Knight slowly took off its hood, revealing a delicate and pretty face. It had a head full of silver hair, and its bloodless face had a trace of sickly paleness. A pair of dark green eyes quietly looked at everyone. The Death Knight's gaze turned and coldly swept past some mercenaries in front of the gate of the City of Zombies castle. Then, it looked at Ranerier and D. Lin in the sky. A smile appeared on the Death Knight's face. It was smiling, but there was a trace of contempt in its smile. Pornographic novel at the same time, its hand slowly moved, and the sacred weapon in its hand was raised high. Chapter 477. In an instant, everyone turned pale with fright. It was no joke to have an army of hundreds of thousands charging at them at the same time. As expected, the army of the undead moved. The zombies in front of the army began to move slowly. Although their steps were slow, they were extremely firm. They relied on their mountain-like numbers to get closer and closer. "Be careful! They're coming!" the mercenaries screamed and retreated step by step. In the face of an ocean of enemies, retreating was their only choice. Of course, they had another choice, and that was to retreat into the Castle of Zombies. However, the dark castle was like a monster with its mouth wide open, ready to swallow them at any time. What are we going to do now? What do we do? A huge question mark rose in everyone's heart. The number of enemies was enough to make them despair. Furthermore, with the presence of the powerful Death Knight, it was impossible to break through. At this moment, the first batch of zombies had already arrived in front of the group of people. They let out a strange cry and pounced with their almost rotten bodies. Kill! At this moment, the surrounded mercenaries were riled up. Their eyes were red as they fought back with all their might. For a moment, the shadows of swords and blades were endless. Fighting energy and magic were everywhere. Under the desperate counterattack of the mercenaries, many zombies were cut down. Black liquid flowed out of their bodies, and the entire camp was filled with a nauseating stench. Gah! At this moment, the ghouls in the second echelon also moved. They let out strange cries and pounced out fiercely. Unlike the slow-moving zombies, these ferocious creatures were extremely fast. With a wave of their claws, a bloody piece of flesh would be torn off. With a huge mouth, a bloody arm would be torn off. In this situation, the mercenaries were extremely united. They worked together and exploded with extremely strong fighting power. Countless zombies and ghouls fell down with a cry. However, it was useless. To the massive army of undead, this sacrifice was insignificant. What was more terrifying was that, after the ghouls were injured, they would quickly recover after a few scraps of rotten flesh. They were even more ferocious than before. Reynolds wiped the blood off his face and said to his father, "Ram, father, this won't do. There are too many undead creatures. Why don't you carry us and escape from the sky?" Ram rode on the poisoned scorpion lion and also participated in the battle. He did not speak, but it did not mean that he did not pay attention to every movement around him. Ram had a faint feeling that there was some unpredictable danger even in the sky. Whoa! At this time, a dragon's roar came from the sky. The dragon's roar was filled with anxiety. Everyone looked up and saw that the mighty flame dragon Lannerly was now in a sorry state. His body was covered with spiderwebs, and his flying speed was greatly reduced. Behind Rannerly, there was a large group of flying creatures chasing after Rannerly. In the face of such a terrifying number, the arrogant dragon race could only flee. As expected, the sky isn't that safe. D. Lin did not expect to escape alone. She retreated to Ron's side. Ron was not idle either. He commanded a large number of skeletons to fight the undead army. To him, those disgusting walking corpses and ferocious ghouls were equally difficult to deal with. "Ron, what do we do now?" D. Lin asked. "It seems that we can only retreat into the castle. This is the only path it left for us," Ron said calmly. It was the Death Knight. He stood there calmly, without any intention of making a move. His narrowed eyes were full of ridicule, as if these little reptiles were not worth mentioning in front of his undead army. "Is there some kind of conspiracy in this castle?" Ibidu asked. His white fur was now stained with black blood. He looked as if he had been pulled out of a garbage dump. I'm not too sure, but we have no choice now. Lin also understood the situation and said. At this time, the mercenaries began to retreat. They retreated into the castle of the city of zombies. Ron and Lin had no choice but to retreat. Strangely, after the undead army forced all the mercenaries into the castle, their attacks stopped. They kept shouting outside the castle, but did not enter. Yanlong Ranerier was the last to enter. He was chased by the gargoyles in the sky. He had no choice but to retreat into the castle with thousands of mercenaries. Ranier's heart was full of anger. He did not expect that the proud dragons would be so sullen one day. They were driven into the castle like ducks. The most important thing was that the spiderweb-like thing on his body was too strange. It was released by an undead creature that looked like a spider. Once it stuck to him, it would not let go. He was almost pulled to the ground. It was not easy for him to break free, but he was chased by the undead creatures that looked like bats. What is this place? Everyone who was driven into the castle of the city of zombies was still in shock. They looked at everything in front of them with fear in their eyes. They saw that they were in a huge hall. The hall was bigger than they imagined. Even if thousands of them were squeezed together, the hall still seemed spacious. Hundreds of huge pillars supported the ceiling, each of which was so thick that it would take several people to wrap their arms around it. When all the adventurers and mercenaries were driven into the castle, the Death Knight with the sacred weapon sneered and stopped attacking. At this time, the magic formation of the city of zombies was activated again. Boom! 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 The ground shook, the dust on the ceiling fell down, the light dimmed, and the gate of the city of zombies slowly closed. Oh no, they're going to close the gate. It was unknown who shouted, but this time everyone was even more flustered. They crazily squeezed towards the door. Not long after, the door closed with a bang, and magic runes lit up one after another in front of the door that was engraved with patterns. Bam, bam, bam! The panicked mercenaries desperately hit the gate. Unfortunately, it was futile. The magic formation on the gate was still very strong. Don't waste your energy. Even if you break this magic formation, you can't get out. At this time, a cold voice sounded. It was Ranerier of the Dragons. At this moment, he was standing on a high beam, looking down at the crowd. He said coldly, "Don't forget, there is a knight at the peak of the sacred domain guarding outside." Hearing this, all the mercenaries calmed down. That person was right. Even if they broke the magic formation, they couldn't get out of the encirclement of the terrifying undead army outside. At this time, many people recognized that the person who spoke was the powerful dragons who fought with the level 15 monster just now. Under the prestige and pressure of the dragons, many people calmed down and looked at him quietly. For a time, thousands of people were silent. Ron and Lin looked at each other, shocked by the appeal of the dragons. Ranerier smiled, satisfied with everyone's reaction. He smiled and said, "Everyone, I'm Yanlong Ranerier of the Dragons. Like everyone, I'm trapped in this damned place. As you can see, everything in front of you is strange, but I personally think that in the face of such a predicament, we must unite. Only then will we have a chance to survive." After Ranerier finished speaking, there was silence in the hall. After a while, someone asked, "Sir Ranerier, what should we do? It seems that we can't get out now." Ranerier smiled proudly. "In fact, when I was young, I came to this place once with the elders of the dragons. It left a deep impression on me. In my impression, the castle of the city of zombies is extremely huge, much bigger than you think. Below it, there is an unimaginably huge underground palace." Ranerier paused, cleared his throat and said, "What I want to say is that there is more than one exit in the city of zombies. As long as you follow me, I can lead you out of this strange and terrifying place. Long live the dragons! Powerful dragons, we will follow you." As soon as Ranerier finished speaking, the mercenaries cheered. The prestige of the dragons made them trust Ranerier completely. Ranerier had a smile on his face. The feeling of being regarded as a hero made his self-confidence swell. However, he was not as optimistic as he looked on the surface. Yes, there was more than one exit in the city of zombies, but the path of exploration was extremely dangerous. He had no choice but to pull some people along to boost his courage. In the early days, the dragons had almost traveled all over the different planes, but only the city of zombies made the dragons feel fearful. Ranerier knew in his heart that this was definitely not a simple place. If it were not for the pursuit of Ron, he would not have set foot here. At this moment, Ranerier had already cursed Ron 1,800 times in his heart. Ron did not know how many times he had cursed Ranerier in his heart. At this moment, he was talking to Lin. Is what he said true? Is there really an exit in the city of zombies? Lin nodded. Yes, the last time I came, I also left from another exit. There is more than one exit, but there are countless traps in the castle, and it is extremely dangerous. You have to be careful, Lin paused. Remember, if you want to save your life, it is best not to covet anything. The more valuable something is, the more dangerous it is, Ron nodded. He deeply remembered Lin's words. However, at this moment, he was thinking that they had arrived at the city of zombies, but where was the answer he was looking for? He still had no clue. At this time, Ranerier also reminded everyone not to try to covet the wealth, but this sentence was ignored by all the mercenaries. They were originally here for the wealth. The mercenaries had already made up their minds to take a fortune before leaving. With the powerful dragons, leaving was not a problem at all. Then, let's go. Ranerier waved his hand, descended, and slowly flew towards the underground palace of the city of zombies. Ron and Lin glanced at each other and led their clansmen to quickly catch up. The other mercenaries also didn't close their eyes. After a short rest, they also quickly followed up, as if they were afraid of falling behind. The underground palace was really huge. Thousands of people walked in the aisles, but they did not feel the slightest pressure. Everywhere they passed, the wall lamps on the walls lit up, and the faint green light illuminated everyone's faces. It was extremely strange in this atmosphere. Ram, Renaud, and the others followed at the end. Renaud said, "Father, I heard from the dragons that we really can't take anything? It is said that there is a huge amount of wealth here, and maybe there is a suitable sacred sword for you." Sacred sword. Ram gulped and greed flashed in his eyes. However, he quickly calmed down and pondered for a moment. This is our first time here, and we are not familiar with this place. However, I believe that with the prudence of the dragons, they would not say such words so easily, Ram smiled. But we must remember one thing. No matter what kind of wealth, money, or equipment we encounter, we must not be the first to take it. After others have taken it, we will find a way to get it. Lord Father is indeed wise. When Lord Reynolds heard this, he laughed sinisterly. Chapter 478. Inside the underground palace, it was dark and damp. The wall lamps in the corridor flickered like flickering willow, the wisps that could go out at any time. Be careful. There's a staircase below, everyone be careful. Ranerier, who was walking in front, reminded everyone with a torch. Thank you, Sir Ranerier. Mr. Ranerier is really good. In the mercenaries' praise, Ranerier felt a little smug. Thousands of mercenaries did not know each other, but they listened to him. Ranerier liked the feeling of being a leader. Reading pornographic novels. In front of Ranerier, Ron's expression was a little complicated. At this time, Lin approached him and whispered, "When did you offend this guy? Why did he want to kill you?" "I don't know." Ron shook his head. Although Ranerier was from the dragons, he denied that he had anything to do with Firth. Ron did not know his purpose. "Mr. Ranerier, have you really been here before?" A holy knight in heavy armor walked to Ranaria's side and asked in a deep voice. Yes, I have. Ranaria nodded. Seeing that the other party was a strong person from the sacred domain, he softened his tone. This place is full of danger. Only if we work together can we get out of here. Thank you for your care, sir. The holy knight bowed and replied with a dignified face. Ranaria glanced at Di Lin on the other side. It was obvious that this powerful level 15 magical beast was not on the same side as him. His eyes then looked at Ron, who was beside Di Lin, and a trace of anger flashed in his eyes. If it was not to kill this guy, he would not have to be trapped here. Sooner or later I will kill you, Ranaria secretly swore in his heart. As they walked, they reached the end of the hall. The lights dimmed until there was no light at all. The entire room became pitch black. The mercenaries kept taking out torches from their space bags and lighting them up. The room lit up again. Under the guidance of Ranaria, they came to a place with a stone wall. It seemed that there was no path ahead. Ranaria stood there and thought for a moment. He quickly walked to the side of the stone wall and brushed away the dust, revealing something that looked like a wrench. Ranaria gently twisted the wrench. With a zap 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 sound, the stone wall slowly rose, revealing 3 holes. When everyone saw this, they were stunned. There were 3 gates. Which one should they take? Ranaria didn't even think about it and walked straight into the hole on the left. The others could only follow him quickly. The entrance of the cave was very low, and the tall mercenaries had to bend over to get through. However, it was very wide and could easily fit 10 people side by side. The entrance of the cave became wider and wider. At the end of the cave was a long corridor with hexagonal stone slabs on the ground. Under the guidance of Ranaria, the group slowly walked into the corridor. In front is the carrion pool. Everyone be careful, don't fall, Ranaria reminded them. Everyone's heart trembled, and even their movements became cautious. At this time, with a swish sound, a mercenary's feet lit up as if something had been activated. However, no one noticed it. At this time, the mercenary walking at the back stepped on air, and half of his body sank into the ground. He immediately screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Save me! As soon as his voice fell, he saw that the surrounding area had sunk. More than 10 mercenaries fell into the deep pit at the same time. Everyone was shocked. A mercenary with sharp eyes and quick hands grabbed the hand of a mercenary who had fallen into the pit. The people around him scrambled to drag him out of the pit. But when they dragged him out, the poor guy's lower body muscles were completely corroded, leaving only white bones. A large amount of white smoke was emitted from his body, continuously spreading upward. And that mercenary was being corroded to the point that he could not stop screaming, living a life worse than death. Even when he was dragged out, the corrosive force continued to spread upwards. Soon, that person became a skeleton. Everyone be careful. It seems like this place is going to collapse. Ranaria was shocked and shouted. Sure enough, a large amount of green liquid was emitted from the ground, continuously spreading upwards. At this time, a battle began behind them. Rumble. The mercenaries who couldn't escape in time fell down while screaming. Ron looked down and was shocked. It turned out that they were standing on a large amount of strange liquid. It was like magma, but it was green and bubbling. The corridor in the middle was actually a stone bridge. No one knew who triggered some mechanism, but the whole stone bridge began to collapse. Ron quickly woke up. Run, run. Then he pulled Di Lin and ran. The stone bridge sank. On the other side, there was a distance of several hundred meters. Ron ran as fast as he could. As he ran, the bridge behind him kept collapsing. There were several times when he almost fell down. This short distance of several hundred meters, in Ron's eyes, was like thousands of meters. At this time, the stone bridge was completely collapsed. Huge stones continued to fall into the water, splashing a large amount of water. Not good. Ron felt that he stepped on empty air. His heart sank and he secretly cried out. At this time, he only felt his body become light. His whole body was lifted up. Di Lin's voice came into his ears. "Don't be afraid, we can fly." Plop, plop. At this time, many people had fallen into the water. The mercenaries who fell into the water floated a few times in the liquid. They did not even let out a cry before they sank. After a while, white bones floated up from the dark green water. Seeing this, Ron couldn't help but be shocked. This carrion pool was too scary. The group was in a mess. Everyone rushed to the front, and people kept falling into the water. Jump! An orc warrior among the mercenaries gritted his teeth. His body flew up like a cannonball and jumped onto the shore. Fly! Blink! Teleport! At this time, the people in PUBG used all their skills and used all kinds of skills to jump ashore. Those who were weaker could not do anything and could only watch their bodies fall into the carrion pool. Of course, there were some rich mercenaries who had flight scrolls with them. They tore the flight scrolls and flew over. Reynolds was walking at the front of the group. He was relatively calm. Using the downward momentum of the rock, he leaped high. Unfortunately, his body tilted and he lost his balance. He cried out in alarm as he was about to fall into the carrion pool. At this time, he felt his body tighten. His father Ram pulled him up. "Thank you, father." Renaud was still in shock. He looked around. "Where's Kadena?" Save me." At this time, Kadena screamed. She failed to use the magician's teleport spell and was about to fall into the carrion pool. "Kadena!" Renaud saw and panicked. He immediately screamed. Ram wanted to save her, but he was too far away. It was too late. Just as the beauty was about to die, a black shadow rushed out from the side and grabbed Kadena's white and tender arm. Ron summoned the gargoyle at the critical moment and saved Kadena's life. At this time, Kadena was brought to Ron's side by the gargoyle. She looked at the ferocious gargoyle. The more she looked at it, the cuter it was. "If it wasn't for it, I would be dead," Kadena thought. She hurriedly thanked Ron. Ron laughed. "We're classmates. Why are you being so polite?" At this time, Renaud was also brought to the shore by his father Ram. Seeing Kadena together with Ron, he was furious. He didn't dare to go forward and ask for her. He could only stare at her angrily. Kadena naturally saw her fiancé's gaze. Her eyes dimmed as she lowered her head. Her long eyelashes drooped. I'm sorry, Ron. I have to go back, and..." Ron naturally saw Renaud too. He nodded and said, "Then go." His eyes were filled with reluctance. Kadena silently walked back. Ron looked at her back view with a complicated expression. Seeing her return, Renaud couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. He asked, "What did that guy say to you?" "Nothing." Kadena ignored him and stubbornly turned her head away. Renaud didn't know what to do with her. He could only hatefully say, "You're already my fiancé. You're not allowed to interact with him anymore. You can't even talk to him." Kadena's face was tense and she didn't say anything. "I didn't expect this kid to be such a sentimental person." This scene fell into the eyes of Ranerier, who was not far away. He had been carefully observing Ron. He smiled. "However, this kid must die. I can't allow anyone to fight with me for Frigga, even if it's just a possibility. Bring us over. Don't leave us behind." At this time, the vanguard of the team had already crossed the carrion pool. Other than those who fell in, most of them stayed where they were. The stone bridge was broken. Other than those who could fly, they couldn't cross at all. They could only ask for help from the other side, hoping that the people on the other side would be merciful and bring them over. Ron did a rough count. There were only about 100 people who had crossed the stone bridge. All the experts of the sacred domain had come. Other than those who could fly, most of them stayed where they were. Fortunately, the Thousand Illusion Ice Wolf clan had all come over. The magical beast team didn't leave anyone behind. Ron looked at the other side and thought, I'm afraid those pitiful people will become sacrifices. Sure enough, Ranerier coldly looked at the people who hadn't crossed and said, "Let's go." "Wait, Mr. Ranerier, are we not going to save them?" The one who spoke was the Holy Knight. He looked at the mercenaries in the back with eyes full of sympathy. Ranerier sneered, "Mr. Holy Knight, those people don't even have the ability to cross over. This proves that they are all burdens. In this dangerous place, I don't think there's any benefit in bringing these burdens. If you want to save them, then go ahead. Forgive me for not accompanying you." Ranerier coldly said and turned to leave without looking back. "That's a pity." The Holy Knight sighed, shook his head, and left. The people who had crossed the carrion pool had no intention of saving them. They silently followed Ranerier. "Let's go, Ron." Lynn stretched out her hand and pulled Ron. "The last time I came, I didn't enter the castle. If we don't hurry up, we'll get lost." Ron nodded and followed the team. In fact, Ron had a way to bring those people over. He only needed to summon a large number of gargoyles. But thinking that he had no relationship with those people, there was no need to do so. Besides, Ranerier had left. If they didn't follow, they would really get lost. "Damn, those bastards actually abandoned us. You inhumane bastards." The abandoned mercenaries stomped their feet and cursed, but they couldn't do anything other than curse. In this dangerous place, they knew what it meant to be abandoned. "What do we do now?" After the team left, a mercenary asked. When everyone heard this, they fell into a long silence. Apart from those who had passed away and died, there were still more than 2,000 people left. For a moment, more than 2,000 people were completely silent. The air was so quiet that even the sound of a needle dropping could be heard. "We can only find the way by ourselves." At this time, another older mercenary broke the silence. He was a thief. His voice was very low, but in this empty and silent room, everyone could hear him. "It is said that there is more than one exit in the city of zombies. When I came here, I saw several forks in the road. Maybe we can find the exit on another road." Hearing this, the mercenary's eyes lit up. When everyone was in despair, the words of the old mercenary were no less than a glimmer of hope. At this time, a mercenary said loudly, "Good! In that case, from now on, you are our leader. As long as you bring us safely out of the city of zombies, we will treat you well." "Yes, you are our leader. As long as we can get out of this damned place, I am willing to give you all my money." Hearing this, the mercenaries were all excited and expressed their opinions. They needed a leader now, and the words of the old mercenary were like a shot of confidence. The old thief was a little surprised. With his low strength, he had never enjoyed such glory. He was so excited that his face turned red and he shouted loudly, "Good! Since everyone thinks highly of me, I will try my best." "Okay." The mercenaries cheered. The old bandit said loudly, "This road is already blocked. Let's go back the way we came. I believe that we'll find a way out through another cave. Don't worry, I've already made markings along the way. We won't get lost." The remaining 2,000 mercenaries walked back under the lead of the old thief. When they came to the 3 tunnels, the old thief did not hesitate and walked into the tunnel in the middle. After walking for a long time, at this time, they heard a caw sound not far from them. "There is something in front. Quickly, quickly retreat." A mercenary shouted, and they quickly retreated. The way back is blocked too." At this time, the mercenaries who wanted to retreat were horrified to find that a large number of undead creatures had appeared behind them, blocking their retreat. They had been surrounded from the front and back. They were walking slowly like the highly decomposed undead. Their broken mouths made ha-ha sounds which made people's hair stand on end in this strange place. "We are doomed." Chapter 479. Everyone quietly looked behind Ranerier. There were originally thousands of people in the team, but now there were only about 100 people left. Walking in the dark and huge tunnel, it seemed empty. No one spoke. The huge underground palace of the city of zombies was like a maze, extending in all directions. After turning a long corridor, there were suddenly 3 or 4 entrances. No one knew which one to take. Fortunately, Ranerier had been here before, so he vaguely remembered. He thought hard for a while before choosing one of the entrances. In the huge underground palace, there were countless traps and dangers. Suddenly, a large amount of poisonous gas would spurt out from the dark corners. Some would shoot out poisonous needles, and some would directly smash down with a large stone. Even if Ranerier warned them, it was inevitable that some people would fall into the trap. After walking for more than an hour in fear, the team had already paid with more than 10 lives. Boom! A large stone with sharp spikes flew over and was smashed into pieces, filling the ground with smoke and dust. Lord Ranerier, how far are we? The Holy Knight put away his heavy scepter and asked. The Holy Knight's question was what everyone wanted to ask. This place was so bad and horrible that they did not want to stay for a moment longer. It's still early, Ranerier said lightly. He glanced at the people around him and said with a smile, "This place is not as simple as you think. It's already good enough if half of us can make it out. Except for the strong ones from the sacred domain, who can barely make it out, the rest of you can only pray for your own good luck." Ranier's words made everyone's heart tremble. Even Reynolds could not help but worry. With his father's strength, he could barely make it out, but what about him? What about Cadena? The person who did not want to go out the most was undoubtedly Ron. He had already come to this place, and for some reason, the environment, the atmosphere, and even the smell here gave him a very familiar feeling, as if he was born to be here. However, Ron still had no clue. "How is it? Haven't you found the answer you want?" Lin asked. Ron shook his head. "Although I'm already here, I don't know what answer I want. Everything here is both familiar and strange to me, but I keep feeling that something is calling me." Lin nodded. "I used to think that the so-called necromancy and the Scourge Church on the continent were just legends, but now it seems that it's not that simple. If the city of zombies is really built by the Scourge Church, its power is unimaginable." She pondered for a moment. "At the very least, it will be stronger than the Holy See in your human world." After hearing Lin's words, Ron couldn't help but laugh. Holy See? What the hell was that? When the Scourge Church was at its peak, its influence swept across the entire continent. Every living thing in the world was shrouded under its pressure. Even the most powerful Holy See in history could not achieve this. He watched as Ranerier walked out of the corridor and turned into a room, only to see that the outside of the room suddenly became empty, as if they were outside. On the ground, there was a piece of dark soil that seemed to have been scorched into lumps. Green liquid was faintly oozing out of it, and when people stepped on it, it made a creaking sound. With a creaking sound, Ron seemed to feel that he had kicked something. He looked down and saw that it was actually a white skull. The skull's black eyes seemed to be staring at him, which was particularly eerie in the dark. Perhaps because he had seen too many of them, Ron did not feel afraid. Instead, he observed the skull with interest. At this time, he saw a glimmering thing appear beside him. "What is this?" Ron squatted down and asked curiously, gently pushing away the hard black soil on the ground. "It looks like metal." Lin also squatted down and took a look. As the black soil was gradually pushed away, the thing inside was revealed. "It's a sword," Ron said. He gently picked up the sword with both hands. It was a two-handed sword that was 2 meters long and 1 finger wide. Although it had been eroded by countless years and had become worn out, it still revealed a sharp edge. The most surprising thing was that the sword was actually dark gold grade. "A dark gold grade sword!" Ron shouted in surprise. This dark gold grade weapon with high attributes was worth at least 100,000 gold coins. He did not expect to find it so easily. Ron looked around and saw that there were piles of bones everywhere. It was a desolate and austere scene. "This used to be a battlefield," Ron said. "Ah, so many dark gold-grade items." At this time, a surprised voice came from the side. Ron turned his head and saw a mercenary holding a dark gold staff that had just been dug out. The mercenary was shouting in pleasant surprise. "There's one here too! There's one here too!" So many, all dark gold-grade weapons, the mercenaries cheered, and all kinds of voices rose and fell. It was as if the ground was covered in gold. With a casual dig, 1 or 2 items would be dug out from the soil. It could be weapons, equipment, armor, or jewelry. The mercenaries went crazy. They lay down like dogs and used their hands and feet to dig crazily, putting on a show of digging for treasures. "There really are treasures here." Renault's eyes almost popped out. Like the other mercenaries, he also dug desperately on the ground. He dug out a skeleton and casually took off its equipment, stuffing it into his own portal bag. Ram sat on the back of the poisoned scorpion lion and watched coldly. To him, dark gold-grade equipment was no longer attractive. Moreover, he had dignity. If a sacred domain expert fought over dark gold-grade equipment like a dog fighting for poop, he would be laughed at by others. It would be better if it was a holy grade equipment. Katina was also standing. She wouldn't disregard her image and join the fight for the prize. Ron also did not join the fight. To him, there was something more important than treasures here. When Renault took out a dark gold-grade long-handled axe, he realized that the other end of the axe was in the hands of a mercenary. "Let go!" Renault shouted with reddened eyes. At this moment, he did not realize that his face had become distorted due to greed. "I saw it first," the mercenary shouted, not to be outdone. "Die!" Renault's eyes flashed. Without thinking, his portal bag flashed, and he directly took out his weapon and slashed at the mercenary. The mercenary was not weak either. He was already prepared and took out his weapon to fight Renault. Swish! The mercenary who was fighting with Reynolds over the item suddenly stopped. His pornographic novel. A deep line of blood had appeared on his forehead, and blood was continuously seeping out. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he pointed at the tall figure behind Reynolds. "You are saint." Before he could finish, his eyes rolled back and his body fell backwards. "Fighting with me? You're courting death." Renault spat at the mercenary's corpse, turned his head and said, "Father, thank you." The one who attacked was Renault's father, Ram. In front of a sacred domain powerhouse, the mercenary had no ability to resist. Ram nodded and said, "Hurry up and take as much as you can." At this moment, all the mercenaries went crazy. Seeing the treasures everywhere, their eyes turned red. At this moment, the sound of weapons clashing could be heard. Some of the mercenaries could no longer hold back and took out their weapons to fight. Kill! 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 In front of a huge amount of wealth, everyone's eyes turned red. Powerful do-chi erupted from their bodies, and magic balls were thrown out one after another. The battlefield that had been silent for a long time was once again lit up with fireworks. Ranierier crossed his arms and sneered. He was a magical beast, so he didn't need weapons or equipment at all. So he was happy to watch the show. When he saw the mercenaries fighting to the death for an item, he laughed out loud. The battle was getting more and more intense. At this moment, there were a lot of casualties among the mercenaries. Some of the mercenaries who were not strong enough wailed and fell down, but more people were begging for mercy. In the face of greed, the winner's sword was mercilessly waved. Even people who didn't join the fight were affected, such as Ron. At this moment, he was dodging the attack of a human swordsman. But this human swordsman was too weak. Ron just casually flicked the sword of that human swordsman and then kicked him in the chest, kicking him far away. At the same time, he said to Di Lin, "Don't you want to stop them?" "Why should I stop them?" Lin had been smiling while watching Ron's performance. Until the human swordsman was sent flying, she slowly withdrew her gaze and said, "Greed is the original sin of human beings. This is what they deserve," Lin said with a smile. Ron helplessly spread out his hands. "You're scolding me too." Lin smiled slightly. Suddenly, her smile disappeared. "Wait, there seems to be something wrong." Lin's face suddenly became dignified. "What's wrong?" Ron came over and asked. Lin didn't speak. She listened attentively and observed everything around her. Gradually, her face became extremely astonished. "This is not the real world. This is an illusion." "Illusion?" Ron was shocked. At this time, he felt that the space around him gradually became distorted and blurred. In a flash, everyone's body suddenly shook and they all woke up. This is... Suddenly seeing the scene in front of them, everyone was stunned. They were still standing in the same place. Behind them was the carrion pool that they had just passed. It was bubbling. In other words, they had been standing in the same place for half an hour. What skeletons! What dark gold weapons and equipment! They were all fake. The only thing in front of him was a huge, empty room. There was nothing inside. On the ground there were dozens of corpses. There were also many people who were seriously injured and groaning. They were the mercenaries who were fighting for the equipment. But all of this was real. Ranaria's smile suddenly disappeared. He quickly put down his hands. He clenched his teeth and forced out a sentence. Chapter 480. Ranaria had every reason to be angry. He felt that he had been completely played by the owner of the city of zombies, which was totally unacceptable for his pride. But what else could he do? If Ranaria was more powerful than the owner of the city of zombies, he would have seen through this trick a long time ago. Ron raised his head slightly. At this time, he saw a few big words on the high wall, and his heart skipped a beat. The Hall of Illusions. Is all of this really just an illusion? It's so real, Ron thought to himself. The Hall of Illusions was just a small magic circle. Its real function was to burst out the deepest desires in people's hearts. These mercenaries all came to the city of zombies with the intention of finding treasures, which happened to be used by the magic circle to make them hallucinate. Ron came here to find answers, and Lin came here with no purpose. She just came to accompany Ron, so she was the first to wake up. Looking at the dozens of bodies on the ground, everyone sighed. It was not worth it for those people to lose their lives because of their greed. Let's keep going, someone said. Ranaria nodded. Let's go. The team went on their way again. This time, they walked carefully. Whether they could find treasures or not, they had to get out of this damn place, right? The group walked slowly. This time, they came to a place that looked like a cave. It was so narrow that only 3 people could pass through it side by side. Above their heads, there were stalactites that stood in great numbers. Water droplets constantly dripped down, making the whole place seem dark and damp. The Hall of Pain. Everyone looked at the big words on the wall at the entrance of the cave and stopped. There was hesitation in their eyes. Would they run into something terrible again? Let's go in, Ranaria said. He stepped into the Hall of Pain first. Ron and Lin were the second to go in. The others hesitated for a moment and quickly followed. After entering the Hall of Pain, they found themselves in an extremely dark open space. They could not see the end of it. Sue, sue, sue. At this time, a series of trembling sounds came from the front. It was as if something was breaking out of the ground. It was densely packed and there were many of them. What's going on? Everyone tensed up right away. They could not help but draw their weapons from their interspatial bags and stay alert. Ranaria's face darkened. It seems we've run into trouble again. At this time, the commotion in front of them was getting louder and louder. In the pitch-black cave entrance, one figure after another appeared. Corpses. So many corpses. They stood up. A mercenary cried out in horror, the hand holding the sword trembling uncontrollably. Sure enough, in front of them, corpses slowly walked out one after another, densely packed together in a large area. They stood there, their dead gray eyes without a trace of life. These disgusting corpses appeared not only at the front, but also at the front, back, left, and right of the group. In the darkness there were many figures, and it was impossible to see how many there were. A rotten smell spread out, making people want to vomit. They were surrounded in the center. The corpses were wearing mercenaries' clothes, and most of their faces were so rotten that they could not be recognized as humans. Strangely, their faces were still fresh, and their blood was still red as if they had just died. Looking at the disgusting corpses standing in front of them, Ron suddenly found them familiar, as if he had seen them somewhere before. It's them. At this time, some people in the crowd recognized the corpses that suddenly appeared. It's them. Ron finally recognized them after being reminded by others. He could not help but tighten his grip on the weapon in his hand. They were none other than the thousands of mercenaries who were left behind in the carrion pool because they could not fly. Among the corpses that suddenly appeared, there were their former teammates and companions, but now they had all become horrifying corpse puppets. They're all dead. They actually appeared here. A mercenary trembled. At this moment, he could not wait to escape from this horrifying and strange place. Is this karma? Another mercenary's eyes were filled with fear, thinking that after he died, he would also become a corpse controlled by others. He could not help but shudder in his heart. Humph, what do you mean by karma, pretending to be a ghost? Ranaria's face slightly sank and said loudly, "Everyone, get ready to fight." Schwa! With a sound, the experienced mercenaries suddenly got ready to fight. They clearly knew that under the situation of being surrounded, the only way out was to unite and break out. Although they were the same disgusting corpses, Ron could see that these corpses were completely different from the corpses outside. They were more powerful, and the most obvious was that these corpses' eyes were flashing with dark red light. This kind of light often meant berserk and bloodthirsty. "They're zombies!" Ron recognized these things. His heart trembled. These berserk and bloodthirsty guys were more difficult to deal with than the corpses outside. Wah! At this time a zombie screamed. As if it had heard the order to attack, the surrounding zombies suddenly rushed toward everyone. "Kill!" Ranarie shouted, and at the same time, a fist blasted out. The zombie that was running at the front was suddenly burned into nothingness. Boom, 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 the fierce battle unfolded. The mercenaries and the zombies were fighting. For a time, the sound was endless. Do-chi was everywhere, and all kinds of magic elements exploded in the hall. Although they had lost dozens of lives in the Hall of Illusions, the remaining mercenaries were all elites. Their fighting power did not decrease at all. On the contrary, the more they fought, the more courageous they became. The zombies were like wheat being cut down in batches. Pornographic novels, the zombies went crazy. They held simple weapons and desperately rushed toward the mercenaries. They simply ignored the swords that were stabbed at them. They launched an attack with the intention of perishing together with the mercenaries. The battle was white-hot from the beginning. The mercenaries had some advantages, but in the face of the crazy counterattack of the zombies, they were defeated. Holy Light. The Holy Knight in the team was pleasantly surprised to find that his holy power seemed to have a faint restraining effect on the zombies. But it was useless. The number of zombies was too large. Although his body fell down a large number of mutilated corpses, the zombies in the Hall of Illusions were increasing. Everyone had a feeling in their heart. The red-eyed corpses were too powerful. They were stronger than the corpses they had encountered before. Although there were not so many of them, their fighting power was not on the same level. At this time, casualties began to appear among the mercenaries. "Save! Save me!" A mercenary wailed. Soon, he was drowned by the zombies. The others were too late to rescue him. They were torn to pieces alive. Reynolds wiped the blood on his face. At this moment, he had suffered a serious injury. He said, "Father, these damn things are too powerful. What should we do now?" Before Ram could answer, he heard Ranerier shouting, "Everyone, don't fight with these guys. Let's rush out together." As soon as Ranier's voice fell, everyone's spirit was lifted. They raised their strength to the peak and followed Ranerier to break out. Ice ball. Lin condensed a ball in her hand. She threw it out. The powerful ice ball sprinkled thousands of icicles. Many zombies' bodies were penetrated by the icicles. Even so, they did not die. They were still tenaciously moving. But because of the ice, their speed was greatly reduced. What a terrible guy! Lin could not help but gasp. These corpses were too difficult to deal with. She turned her head to look at Ron. She saw that around Ron, there was a large number of corpses. He was holding two long white bone spears in his hands. He was fighting fiercely. "You killed all these?" Lin asked in disbelief. "You killed so many people?" Bang! At this time, Ron stabbed the bone spear in his hand into the heart of a zombie. The zombie seemed to be fixed. It suddenly stopped moving. The red light in its eyes gradually dimmed. Finally, it fell to the ground. "It's that simple?" Lin's face was full of disbelief. In her view, these corpses were much stronger than the ones she encountered outside. Even if she was a magical beast from the sacred domain, it was still a bit difficult for her. But she saw Ron kill these corpses. It was as simple as eating and drinking. Ron smiled at her. In the darkness, a row of white teeth could be seen. He pointed at his chest and said with a smile, "Their weakness is their heart," the killing continued. At this time, the mercenaries gradually gathered together and formed a fixed formation. The warriors were on the outside, the magicians were in the middle, and the priests were in the innermost. They cooperated with each other and formed a strong fighting force. The zombies' line of defense began to be torn apart little by little. At this time, no one noticed that a zombie that was cut in half from the waist suddenly opened its eyes. Its eyes flashed red. It struggled to get up and crawled slowly on the ground with its two hands. The mercenaries who were killing with ease didn't realize that the danger was slowly approaching. Ron inadvertently glanced at the zombie that was crawling. He saw that the veins on the zombie's body were exposed. Its muscles were expanding and contracting. Its gray and rotten skin was slightly red. Ron couldn't help but feel a little strange. This zombie seems to be a little. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. His heart suddenly sank. "Not good, everyone get out of the way. It's going to self-destruct." Ron's reminder was too late. The zombie that only had half of its body suddenly screamed. Its hands supported its body, and its body suddenly bounced up. Like a meteor catching up with the moon, it pounced on the nearest mercenary. Before the mercenary could react, he was already caught. At the same time, the zombie's half-body burst out with a strong light. Boom! Chapter 481. Like poking a hornet's nest, the explosions of the corpses caused the surrounding zombies to imitate them. These former teammates and companions rushed towards the mercenaries with bloodshot eyes and bared their teeth. At the same time, they activated the remaining energy in their bodies. Self-explosion. Bang! 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 Blood splattered everywhere. Every exploding corpse took a living person with it. In just a moment, more than 10 people lost their lives. Of course, there were exceptions, such as Ranerier. He was also entangled by a few exploding corpses, but he survived with his strong body. This is corpse explosion. Ron gasped. He recognized this terrifying magic. Grandpa Homelin once told him that this magic involved a mysterious and terrifying profession. Ranerier finally couldn't hold it in anymore. The endless corpse explosion drove him crazy. No matter how strong his body was, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. At this moment, he was already injured. Roar! Ranerier roared and began to transform into his huge body. In the Hall of Pain, a huge red dragon lay in the middle. He spread his huge wings and occupied almost half of the hall. Get out of my way! Ranerier was furious. He opened his mouth and breathed out a wave of dragon breath. The hot dragon breath swept out like a sea of fire. In an instant, a large number of zombies were set ablaze. The zombies struggled and were turned into ashes in an instant. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They looked at Ranerier with gratitude and admiration. The strength of the dragons was too strong. Ranerier breathed out a few more waves of dragon breath. Wherever the dragon breath passed, a large number of zombies were burned to death. However, more and more zombies came from all directions. It was as if the number of zombies didn't decrease at all. Go, don't get entangled with them. Ranerier let out a long roar. He took a deep breath and spread his wings. His huge body soared into the sky and flew over the sea of zombies. He rushed forward while constantly breathing out dragon breath. In an instant, the number of zombies around him decreased greatly. Quickly follow Lord Ranerier. Follow him and break through the encirclement. The mercenaries cheered and followed behind Ranerier. They couldn't wait to rush out of this terrifying sea of corpses. Lin didn't want to be outdone. She used an ice ball to open up a path, and a large number of zombies fell down instantly. Let's go too, Lin said to Ron. Ron nodded. Kill, kill, kill. The desire to survive motivated all the mercenaries. They followed behind Ranerier and burst out with powerful fighting strength. Those zombies were destroyed before they could even self-destruct. The battered and exhausted mercenaries finally rushed out of the entanglement of zombies. At this moment, there weren't many mercenaries left alive, and everyone was injured. Run, we're almost there. This sentence made all the exhausted mercenaries full of energy. They could already see the dark gate in front of them. Ka. At this time, a mechanical sound came from somewhere. It seemed like someone had activated a mechanism. Ron looked up and saw that the wall in front of the gate slowly moved forward, revealing a large number of black holes. Ron couldn't help but feel nervous. He shouted, "Be careful, there's a mechanism in front." It was too late to say it. Just as Ron's voice fell, there was a swoosh, swoosh sound. Countless arrows were shot out from the huge wall. They were densely packed like locusts, shooting towards the mercenaries. The mercenaries who just rushed through the zombie crowd were shocked. It was too late to dodge. Besides, they couldn't dodge. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sound of arrows piercing flesh was heard. Many mercenaries were caught off guard. Ron's reaction was faster. He summoned a bone shield to block the arrows. Damn, these arrows are poisonous. The mercenaries cursed. Although the arrows were small, they carried a strong poison. The mercenaries who were hit by the arrows became extremely weak. This is the plague. Ron immediately recognized these things. The poison on the arrows was none other than the plague virus. After being hit by it, it would spread and make people weak. Swoosh! After the first wave of arrows, the second wave of arrows came again. This time, it wasn't so easy to block. Haze technique. Ron's mind raced, and his body turned into a cloud of mist. The plague arrow passed through his body, which had already turned into a shadow, and he escaped again. The dissipated fog condensed again. Ron finally appeared and landed on the ground. At this time, he stepped on empty air and lost his balance. Not good! Ron shouted in his heart. He felt that he seemed to have triggered some kind of mechanism. Rumble! It turned out that a round black hole suddenly opened under Ron's feet. He couldn't dodge and fell straight down. Lin, save me! Ron only had time to call out. His body suddenly sank. The hole seemed to have a strange suction force. It sucked his whole body in. He couldn't even escape. Ron! Lin exclaimed. She appeared beside Ron as fast as she could. She wanted to grab Ron's arm, but she was too late. After the hole swallowed Ron, it quickly closed. It was as if it had never appeared. There wasn't even a trace. Ron. Lin was heartbroken. She lay on the place where Ron fell and cried. At this moment she was angry and regretful. She hated herself for not being closer to Ron. That way Ron wouldn't have been in trouble. The mechanism stopped and everything returned to normal. Other than the number of people being fewer, it was as if nothing had happened. The survivors finally breathed a sigh of relief. The crisis was finally over. They began to rest and reorganize. Looking at Lin, who was crying her heart out, many people felt sympathy for her. Ibi-Do and the other 1,000 Illusion Ice Wolf clan members stood beside Lin. At this moment, their expressions were as if they were mourning. That guy is finally dead. Rannerly was gloating in his heart. Now, he could finally put down a huge rock in his heart. He thought for a while and slowly walked over with a smile. "What do you want to do?" Ibi-Do shouted. His eyes were filled with vigilance. Rannerie ignored him. He took out a handkerchief from his space bag and handed it to Lin. With an elegant smile, he pretended to comfort her and said, "Miss Lin, don't cry. The dead can't be brought back to life. Please restrain your grief." Lin ignored him and didn't take the handkerchief. She lay on the ground and cried. Her long white hair hung down and covered her face. She sobbed softly. Her shoulders shook, making people feel sympathy for her. Rannerie smiled. His lips curled up and he said softly, "Miss Lin, why do you have to do this? He's just a human. You're so beautiful and powerful. You don't have to worry about not being able to find a good husband. Whether it's a human or a magical beast, there are plenty of good men." He paused and smiled. "Actually, the conflict between you and me originated from this human. Now that he's dead, there's no reason for us to be enemies. If you're willing, I think we can even be friends." Rannerie had good intentions. Of course, he didn't rule out the possibility that he was lustful. Seeing Lin's beauty and excellent bloodline, he couldn't help but have thought. He thought that with his noble status as dragons, it would be easy for him to deal with a king beast of a lowly race. Unfortunately, he was wrong. Get lost. Suddenly, Lin raised her head. A pair of blood-red eyes stared coldly at him. She gritted her teeth and said word by word, "Get lost. I don't want to see you for a moment." Rannerie was ashamed and angry. He didn't expect Lin to have such a reaction. He stood there, his face turning green and white. For a moment, he couldn't get out of the embarrassing situation. "Are you leaving or not? If you don't leave, I'll kill you." Lin shouted resolutely. Her white fists were slightly clenched. A cold, murderous intent was released in an instant. Her beautiful face was distorted with anger. She looked like she was going to fight Rannerie to the death. Ron's life was unknown. Lin vented her anger on Rannerie. Those mercenaries had been paying attention to the movements here. Seeing this, they sucked in a breath of cold air. It seemed that the two powerful level 15 magical beasts were going to have a thrilling battle. Now that they had just escaped danger, it wasn't a good thing for them to fight. "Lord Rannerie, you'd better leave. The Heavenly Wolf King is angry. She won't listen to anything you say," Ibi-Do said. At this moment, he could only be a peacemaker. He was very clear about the other party's strength. Rannerie was frightened by Lin's momentum. He didn't know what to do and stepped back. He waved his hand desperately and said, I don't mean anything else. I'll leave." After saying that, he quickly took back the handkerchief and fled. Lin's eyes flashed with evil fire. She suppressed her anger, but she didn't lose her mind. If the other party weren't dragons, she would have pounced on them. Rannerie ran back dejectedly. Lin gave him a hard rebuff. He was ashamed and angry. His action just now almost made the dragons lose face. Ranerier saw that the surrounding mercenaries were looking at him as if they were laughing at him. He suddenly became angry and said angrily, "What are you looking at? I'll kill you all if you keep looking." The dragons were so powerful that the mercenaries didn't dare to make a sound. They all turned their heads as if they didn't see anything. After scolding those guys, Ranier's anger subsided a little. He looked at Di Lin in the distance. His eyes were about to spit fire. He said hatefully, "This little bitch wants to do it the hard way. Sooner or later, I'll teach you a lesson." Although he said that, Ranerier didn't dare to go forward. Otherwise, this wolf girl with the bloodline of an ancient sacred beast would definitely fight him to the death. Although the strength of both sides was about the same, there was always a reason to fight, right? He thought that this fight was meaningless. If he wasn't careful, he might even lose his life. Ranerier still cherished his life. He could bully those who were weaker, but if he really had to fight with someone who didn't lose to the dragons in all aspects, he still felt a little nervous. Dong! 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 Ron, who was swallowed by the hole, fell down. It wasn't that he didn't want to rush up, but he couldn't. He felt like there was a strange suction force below, making him unable to break free. His body was also out of control. He rolled down the slope, bumping and bumping all the way until he fell into the depths. Chapter 482. After an unknown period of time, Ron slowly woke up. His eyelids fluttered and all he saw was a beautiful back view. The back view seemed to have felt the movement behind her. She turned around and smiled sweetly. "Ron, you're awake? Pornographic novel? Kadena?" Ron desperately opened his eyes. In the darkness, he finally recognized the peerless beauty that had captivated countless men. He shook his head in disbelief. "Why are you here?" Katina smiled, revealing a row of beautiful, snow-white teeth in the darkness. She said, "I don't know what happened either. I was fine just now, but it felt like I was sucked down by some force. When I woke up, I was already here, and then I saw you." She paused. "I woke up just a little earlier than you." Ron nodded. He slowly stood up. When he moved his body, he felt his muscles ache. Fortunately, it was nothing serious. "Where is this place?" Ron asked. Kadena shook her head. "I don't know." Ron carefully looked around. He saw that they were in a relatively large space. It looked like they were underground because there was an underground river not far from them. The river water flowed slowly. The bottom of the river was clearly visible. He could vaguely see fish swimming below. The top of the river was full of hard stone walls. Ron smiled bitterly. "We seem to be trapped underground. What do we do now?" Kadena was a little scared. "Will we be trapped here forever?" "Don't be so pessimistic." Ron smiled. "Let's try to find the exit together." Kadena nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. The two had no choice. Under the situation where they couldn't distinguish north from south underground, they could only go up the river and hope to find the exit upstream. In the darkness, Ron walked in front and Kadena followed behind. They slowly walked forward. The underground was very quiet. The two could hear each other's breathing. They walked for a long time. For more than an hour, the two didn't speak. The atmosphere was a little gloomy. "How have you been after graduation?" Ron finally couldn't help but take the initiative to ask. Kadena replied, "What's so good about it? It's still the same. Go back to the Doro Kingdom and continue to be my princess. Then, find a random person to marry. In the future, I'll just be a housewife, hee." Kadena smiled, but there was some bitterness in her smile. Ron sensitively caught the resentment in Kadena's words, which also contained a trace of helplessness. He was silent for a while and asked, "You don't like that Reynolds?" "Like?" Kadena smiled. "So what if I like you?" "So what if she didn't like him?" Nobles like us may seem glamorous to outsiders, but it's impossible for us to decide our own marriage." Ron felt sympathy in his heart. He nodded and said, "I remember you told me that your ideal husband is a tall and handsome dragon knight who appears from the sky on a flying dragon to marry you. Are you disappointed that Reynolds is not a dragon knight? I didn't expect you to remember this." Kadena blushed and said in a low voice. Then her face quickly returned to normal. She sighed and said, "That's all in the past. At that time, I didn't know anything. I only knew that Dragon Knight was the strongest, most handsome, and most flashy profession. Now, I have to be realistic. It's already good enough to find a husband who treats me well." "You're right. There aren't many things in life that go according to one's wishes." Ron nodded. He thought for a while and said, "I think Reynolds treats you well. Except for not being a dragon knight, he meets all your requirements, well?" Kadena felt a stab of pain in her heart. When she thought of Reynolds leaving her alone, she felt uncomfortable. She didn't like Reynolds from the start, but for the kingdom of Doro and her family, she could only throw caution to the wind. After getting along for half a year, their relationship was stable. Reynolds wasn't that unacceptable. However, Reynolds' actions in Forgotten City had thoroughly broken her heart. Although Reynolds apologized again and again, Kadena understood that this action had left a shadow in their hearts. They could never return to the past. Kadena took a deep breath and waved her hand. "Forget it. Don't mention it. I don't want to talk about him." Seeing that Kadena was in low spirits, Ron had no choice but to tactfully shut his mouth. The two of them returned to their original silence. Kadena frowned slightly, thinking about her own worries. The two walked along the underground river, but the road became narrower and narrower. In the end, there was almost no road. They could only feel the walls and slowly walk. "Come." Ron held a sharp bone spur in one hand and deeply inserted it into the stone wall. His other hand stretched out towards Kadena. He wanted to pull Kadena over. Kadena hesitated for a moment, but in the end she still stretched out her white and tender little hand. Different from Ron, Kadena was a magician with a weak body. Of course, she could use other methods to cross this stone wall, but they would all consume magic power. At this critical moment, it was better to use magic power sparingly. When Kadena's soft little hand was held by Ron, his heart couldn't help but sway. He couldn't help but gently pinch it twice. He looked down and saw that Kadena's face was flushed red. The two passed through the difficult stone wall in an awkward atmosphere. Kadena quickly withdrew her hand and said in a low voice, "Thank you." "You're welcome." Ron was slightly disappointed. He also had a good impression of Kadena. However, Ron also knew that her husband's father was a powerhouse of the sacred domain. He knew that he couldn't afford to offend such an existence. After walking for a long time, they finally saw a glimmer of light in front of them. Ron was overjoyed. "We've reached the exit. Maybe we can find Lin and the others." "Is that so?" Kadena smiled faintly. There wasn't much joy in her expression. Ron quickly ran forward. Just as he reached the entrance of the cave, he smelled a pungent stench. What he saw was a huge room without any exits. Ron's heart turned cold with a whoosh sound. Go go go. At this time, a sound attracted Ron's attention. In the darkness, a huge figure slowly stood up. Needless to say, the stench was coming from its body. Who are you?" The huge figure that stood up looked like a fat man. It was emitting a disgusting stench. Ron's heart trembled. He had a feeling that the other party was not a good person. Goo goo desh, a strange sound came from the fat man's mouth. He slowly turned around. "What?" Ron looked and shuddered. His whole body froze. What appeared in his eyes was an extremely hideous and disgusting face. Its cheeks were fat, and its eyes were drooping lifelessly. There was a shocking dark red scar on its face that stretched from its face to its chest. It was wriggling like a centipede. Its right hand was holding something that looked like a broadsword, and its left hand was connected to an iron hook-like object. The strangest thing was its abdomen. It was slightly split open like a human mouth, revealing sharp teeth. The big mouth slowly wriggled as if it wanted to swallow Ron. Its whole person was like a pile of corpses. It was disgusting and terrifying. This is... Ron was stunned. A thought flashed through his mind, as if he had thought of something terrible. His face suddenly changed, and he turned around to flee. Ron, what's wrong? Ron, who had just rushed out, bumped into Kadena. Seeing Ron in a hurry, he asked. Gugudesh. At this time the it inside slowly walked out. Its face was expressionless. It was like a pile of moving minced meat. Adesh, Kardina was scared out of her wits when she saw it. To be honest, anyone would be scared out of their wits when they saw it because it was too disgusting and terrifying. Kardina wondered if she would have nightmares when she returned home after seeing it. Let's go. Ron did not have time to say anything. He immediately took her hand and ran wildly. Ron pulled Kadena and ran for a long time. The two finally stopped. Ron gasped. Finally safe. Kadena was also out of breath. Ron, do you know what it is? I know. Ron's face quickly returned to normal. It's called an abomination. It's a very powerful and terrifying undead creature. Abomination. Kadena took a deep breath. This name is too appropriate. That guy is really ugly and disgusting. Abominable. Gugugudish. While the two were talking, a sound that made their hair stand on end came from not far away. They saw that the huge and disgusting abomination warrior had already rushed over and appeared in front of them. This guy can fly? Kadena was shocked. She kept retreating. Sacred domain? Ron was also stunned. When Grandpa Homelin explained this thing, he did not say that it was a sacred domain. Gugugu, the abomination, had already found them. Its huge, evil eyes swept over them. Without any warning, its right hand suddenly swept towards Ron. Ron was shocked and hurriedly dodged. Boom! The huge hook slammed into the stone wall, causing the rocks to shatter and dust to rise from the ground. Ron. Kadena was anxious. She quickly took out her magic staff from the space bag at her waist. A high-level water magic icicle cone was blasted towards the abomination. The icicle cone fiercely hit the abomination. A burst of ice scattered in all directions. Everywhere it went there was a white mist. Not bad. A smile appeared on Kadena's face. She did not think that her sneak attack would succeed so smoothly. She was a little proud. This guy was hit by my icicle cone. Even if he doesn't die, he will be seriously injured, right? But in the next moment, something incredible happened. The area on the abomination's face that was bombarded did not even lose a single hair. Only a few shallow scars were left. How is this possible? Such a close sneak attack. Kadena was so shocked that her jaw almost fell to the ground. At this time, her actions had attracted the abomination's attention. The abomination approached her step by step. Don't come over. Kadena took a step back in horror. Facing the powerful abomination warrior, she was somewhat at a loss. In a moment of desperation, she could not even release half a spell. Swish! An extremely strong ice power began to spread from the abomination warrior's feet, freezing its entire body there. At this time, Ron's cold voice shouted. Frost Nova! Burst! Boom! 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 The abomination warrior's surroundings suddenly exploded. An extremely cold air burst out and filled the entire space. In front of Kadena was a fog, and she could not see anything clearly. At this time, she only felt her hand tighten slightly. Ron's low and powerful voice came into her ears. Go. We are not its opponent. Chapter 483. After sealing the powerful hate warrior in ice, Ron pulled Kadena up, turned around and fled. His speed was very fast, and soon they were out of sight. In the underground palace, the two ran all the way until Kadena was out of strength. Ron even summoned the agile skeleton warrior to carry the two of them and ran for a long time before stopping. Huff, huff, huff. In the dark underground palace, the sound of two people panting could be heard. Ron and Kadena were leaning against the wall, gasping for air. The air in the underground palace was a little turbid, and the two of them were a little out of breath. That was close. We were almost finished. Kadena stuck out her tongue and said to Ron. Ron smiled and said, "Fortunately, although this guy is strong and his defense is strong, his speed is still a little slow." Kadena stroked her chest, her towering breasts rising and falling. At this moment, her whole body was almost leaning on Ron's back. The two of them were holding hands, and their posture was very ambiguous. She blew into Ron's ear, and a burst of young girl's fragrance passed through Ron's nostrils, making him feel refreshed. Kadena also felt that it was a little inappropriate for the two of them to be so close. She blushed and moved away from Ron, quickly withdrawing her hand. "I'm sorry." Ron immediately let go of her hand and hurriedly apologized. "It's nothing." Kadena smiled magnanimously. She paused for a moment. "There's no way to go in front. What should we do now?" "Let's go back." Ron thought for a moment. There might be a way out behind. Kadena agreed, and the two of them walked back a few steps. Suddenly, Ron stopped abruptly. "Let's go." "What's wrong?" Kadena asked, puzzled. "There's someone in front." Ron smiled and said. He had just released the Ghost 4 reconnaissance and had already seen the figure in front. The next moment, Ron's smile froze, because he saw a person he didn't want to see at all. Reynolds. Reynolds also seemed to be lost, looking around as he walked. At this moment, Reynolds also noticed them. He stopped in his tracks and shouted coldly. "Who? What a small world." Seeing Reynolds, Ron couldn't hide even if he wanted to in this place. He couldn't help but bitterly smile in his heart. This Reynolds had a very bad impression of him. He had always suspected that he had some sort of relationship with his fiancée, Kadena. But now, he was with Ron, but he was with Kadena. Even if he had 10 mouths, he couldn't explain it clearly. Kadena also saw Reynolds, and her mouth formed an O shape. "It's me." Ron sighed slightly. He had no choice but to brace himself and go forward. Reynolds had also fallen with Ron and the others, but he had appeared in another place. Who would have thought that they would meet here? "It's you?" Reynolds didn't expect to meet the two of them here. His eyes widened as he stared at Ron like a venomous snake. His eyes were so angry that it looked like they were about to spit fire. "Reynolds!" Suddenly seeing her fiancé, Kadena's eyes were somewhat flustered. "Why are you here?" Reynolds's face tightened as he looked at Kadena and coldly asked. I fell with Ron. When I woke up, I was in this place." Kadena said. "Fell with Ron?" Reynolds sneered. "What a coincidence." Ron didn't care much about Reynolds. His face slightly sank. "Reynolds, what do you want to say?" "What do I want to say?" "Ron, you know what you did. Don't tell me you didn't do anything, I don't believe it." Reynolds sneered and said. Kadena couldn't bear it any more and angrily said, "Reynolds, do you know what you're saying? Show some respect with your mouth." "Respect?" Reynolds sneered. "Kadena, what do you think you look like now?" Kadena looked down. It turned out that after a round of running, her clothes were a bit messy. No wonder Reynolds misunderstood. Ron glanced at Kadena, then took a deep breath and said with a cold face, "Reynolds, I won't argue with you about the past. But in this matter, you've really misunderstood Kadena. Whether you believe it or not, my relationship with her is not as dirty as you think." Reynolds sneered. "Do you think I'll believe it?" Ron was also angered and said, "Then what do you want?" "You." Cadina was at a loss. At this moment, she didn't know how to explain to Reynolds. The two of them were at each other's throats, staring at each other as if they were cross-eyed. The air was filled with the smell of gunpowder. Today, either you die or I die. Reynolds slowly pulled out his sword from his space bag and said. Ron's eyes focused. You're not my opponent. Is that so? Reynolds sneered. He pretended to be surprised and looked behind Ron, at this moment. There's no one around you who can protect you anymore, right? Ron's heart sank. His eyes flashed with a trace of unease. What are you trying to say? I'm trying to say, Reynolds smiled, his eyes filled with killing intent, your time of death has come. At this moment, a bright light appeared at the corner of Ron's eyes. Not good. Ron rolled on the ground and dodged the attack. His forehead felt cold and strands of black hair were cut off. Ron retreated a few steps. His heart was covered in cold sweat. If he dodged a little later, his head would have been separated from his body. He looked over and his expression suddenly froze. It's you. In a dark corner, a figure quietly walked out. He was none other than the Doro Kingdom's guardian of the sacred domain, venomous scorpion lion knight Ram. At this moment, he was holding a one-handed longsword with the tip slightly lowered. Needless to say, the attack just now was his doing. When did you come? Ron composed himself and asked. Ram smiled. I came a long time ago. Unfortunately, you didn't realize that your every move was under my control. I was careless. No wonder this Reynolds was fearless just now. I should have thought that he would appear as well. Ron thought silently and his heart sank. Ron stared at Ram and slowly said, It's been a long time, Lord Ram. However, as a sacred domain expert, you suddenly launched a sneak attack. Your methods are a bit despicable. Ram's voice was calm without the slightest ripple. Ron, you have repeatedly opposed me. It would be too easy for you to die like this. You want to kill me? Ron suddenly became nervous. The orange legendary staff was held in his hand. What do you think? At this moment, that level 15 magical beast is no longer by your side. Let's see who can protect you now. Ram said expressionlessly. He didn't waste any more words. With a wave of his hand, he summoned his mount, the sacred domain's venomous scorpion lion. Ron was already prepared. He waved his bone staff and summoned the most powerful Terror Knight. Within the hexagram, the Terror Knight slowly rose up, and in a short while, he was fighting with Lom. Uncle Ram, don't! Cadina cried out. She was about to throw herself at Ron's side, but Reynolds suddenly pulled her back. Stop! Come back here! Reynolds's hand was like an iron clamp that pinched Cadina's soft and white arm. He laughed and said, What's wrong? Are you heartbroken? Let me tell you, this kid is going to die today. You can't kill him. He is my classmate. Cadina anxiously said. Classmate? Ha ha! Reynolds sneered. You are not just his classmate. Don't lie to yourself. You have never liked me. I'm afraid it's because of him. Cadina was anxious and angry. You, don't talk nonsense. Ron was focused on tangling with Ram. When he heard this, he was so scared that he almost fell down. Nonsense? Reynolds sneered. I think you too. Just now. I'm afraid you have done everything. In this terrifying place. Hee, it's quite romantic. Reynolds's heart was filled with intense jealousy. His smile was full of anger and unwillingness. You are shameless. Cadina was flustered and exasperated. She angrily raised her hand and slapped Reynolds in the face. Ha ha! Reynolds caressed his painful cheek. A trace of hatred flashed in his eyes. Cadina, let me tell you, whether you are willing or not. In this life, you are destined to be my woman. As for Ron, Reynolds sneered, whether you love him or not, he is going to die. Boom. The Terror Knight turned into a cloud of black smoke and disappeared in the intense explosion. At this time, Ron and Ram's battle was coming to an end. Huff, huff, huff. Ron desperately gasped for breath. His eyes were fixed on Ram. At this moment, he was already injured. His black robe was full of bloodstains. Ron's hand holding the bone staff was trembling. His heart was also trembling. He used all his strength but was unable to do anything to his opponent. The difference in strength between him and an expert of the sacred domain was too great. Give up. Ram was still expressionless. He rode on the back of the poisoned scorpion lion and coldly said, "In front of me, you are just a pitiful little worm. Although your strength is a bit strange, it doesn't matter if I see through it. Look, Ron is going to die." Reynolds sneered not far behind Ram. "If you can't bear to, then look at him a little longer. I'm afraid you won't be able to see him again." Ron! Kadina's heart trembled. She didn't know why, but seeing Ron's current appearance, her heart inexplicably felt like it was being cut by a knife. At this time, Lay Wasteland lightly hugged Kadina's shoulder and laughed. "As long as he dies, your body and your heart will all belong to me." "Ha ha!" Renaud laughed maniacally. "I am going to save him." Kadina stood there in a daze. At this moment, she suddenly seemed to have made up her mind. "What are you doing? You're not allowed to go." Reynolds panicked. He stretched out his hand to grab Kadina, but he saw Kadina's figure flash and disappear from the spot, causing Reynolds to grab onto nothing. "Teleport!" Reynolds was stunned for a moment, then he angrily clenched his fist. His knuckles made cracking sounds as two words escaped from his mouth: "Bastard." "Uncle Ram, I beg you, don't kill him." Just as Ram raised his sword to kill Ron, Kadina's beautiful figure suddenly appeared beside Ron. She protected him behind her and pleaded. Ram's face darkened. "Kadina, what are you doing?" "Reynolds, you brat, quickly pull your wife away." Ron frowned. He really didn't want Kadina to get involved in this mess. He said softly, "Kadina, this has nothing to do with you. Move aside." Kadina shook her head and refused. "No. Ron, if I get out of the way, they will kill you." Then, she turned to Lom and made a final effort. "Uncle Lom, you've watched me grow up, and you've been very good to me. You're like a daughter to me. Can I beg you for a favor?" Even though Kadina didn't say it, Ram already knew what she was going to say. He immediately refused. If it was something else, it would be fine. "But this is impossible. Reynolds, King, get your ass over here." Ram raised his voice. His next sentence was directed at Reynolds. Coming. Reynolds anxiously ran over, sweating profusely. He shouted, "Kadina, quickly come back." "No. I won't come back." Kadina's eyes were filled with determination. "Uncle Ram, since you don't agree to let Ron go, then kill me too, you." Reynolds's eyes were about to spurt fire. He couldn't do anything to Kadina. Lom was also rather helpless. The two of them were so close to each other. If he were to kill Ron, he would definitely injure Kadina as well. He was in a dilemma, and the four of them froze there. Goo goo goo. Just at this moment, a soft sound came from behind Ron. In this strange environment, it made one's hair stand on end. Chapter 484. Coo coo coo. Heavy footsteps sounded as a huge figure slowly walked out. It was close to 2 meters tall and had a fat body. It was the hate warrior that had been chasing Ron and Kadina. Through the weak light, Ram finally saw the face of the person who had come. He was stunned. "What is this thing?" "An undead creature." "It's an undead creature," Reynolds said, carefully sizing up the huge figure. His stomach twitched a few times and churned, and he almost vomited. Heavens! This guy is simply disgusting. The huge and fat hate warrior looked like a pile of minced meat. Its body was densely covered with needle-like things, and its whole body emitted an intense stench like rotting meat. The smell was extremely unpleasant. It's chasing us." Kadina's face was filled with fear. At this moment, She did not know what to do. On the other hand, Ron's face had a trace of confusion, and his injured body was bleeding non-stop. Only one? Ram, who was riding on the back of the poisoned scorpion lion, resisted the urge to vomit and looked behind the hate warrior warily. However, he did not find any other undead creatures. "This guy is too disgusting. Father, kill it," Reynolds said as he took out a white handkerchief to cover his nose. "Yes." Ram nodded slightly. No matter what, the appearance of this terrifying and disgusting thing at this critical juncture was still an eyesore. He decided to get rid of it while he was at it. Powerhouses of the sacred domain did not need a reason to make a move. If they wanted to kill, they would kill. Ram moved the longsword in his hand, and a fiery sword arc suddenly shot towards the hate warrior. Boom! A loud sound rang out. Flames filled the air, and a burnt smell spread out. The hate warrior's huge body fell to the ground with a crash. Its body was like roasted meat, making sizzling sounds as its muscles twitched uncontrollably. "I hit it head-on, and this guy actually did not dodge? These undead creatures are really stupid." Reynolds laughed exaggeratedly. He was proud of his father's strength. "Hee, it's dead for sure. I used 30% of my strength in that strike. Just as you said, if there wasn't such a terrifying number of them, these undead creatures wouldn't be anything special." Ram was smiling proudly, but in the next moment, his smile suddenly disappeared. However, with a goo sound, the huge figure actually stood up in front of Ram and Renault's incredulous gazes. At this moment it seemed to be enraged, and its ugly face was filled with anger. What? Ram and Reynolds were shocked. This guy was actually so tough? Even a powerhouse of the sacred domain could not guarantee that he would be fine after taking a direct hit. Sure enough, the hate warrior was enraged by Ram. It roared and waved the large blade in its right hand. With a strong sound of breaking the air, it fiercely chopped towards Ram. Flame shield. Ram immediately put up a defensive technique, just in time to meet the hate warrior's large blade. Boom! A loud sound rang out and sparks flew everywhere. This gave Ram a deeper understanding of the hate warrior's strength. What the hell? This undead creature's strength is actually at the level of the sacred domain. Ram cursed inwardly. The hate warrior was like an enraged lion, constantly attacking Ram. Its huge blade and light iron hook were constantly smashed towards Ram and his poisoned scorpion lion. The strange way of attacking immediately caused Ram to be flustered. Reynolds was stunned. The strength of this disgusting, undead creature that looked like a pile of minced meat far exceeded his imagination. It was actually evenly matched with his father. Ram was somewhat regretful that he had provoked this fellow. If he had known earlier, he would not have struck with his sword first. In the narrow space, the two forces collided. Ram used the purest fire element energy, while the hate warrior used an unknown light green energy. This kind of energy was not at a disadvantage against the poisoned scorpion lion knight Ram. Coming back from the jaws of death, Kadena did not think that this terrifying and disgusting undead creature called hate would suddenly appear and save them. At this moment, she suddenly realized that this was an opportunity. A chance to escape. "Can you still walk?" Kadena reached out to help Ron up and asked in a low voice. Hearing Kadena's voice, the heavily injured Ron weakly lifted his eyelid. You want to take me away?" Kadena nodded. Then what about them? If you take me away, how will you explain to them?" Ron looked at Reynolds and Ram on the other side and said in a low voice. At this moment, the two of them were being beaten back by the hate warrior. Kadena bit her lip and said in a low voice, "Your life is more important. I'll take you away first and explain to them later." After saying that, she did not waste time talking nonsense with Ron. She reached out to hold his arm, gritted her teeth and quickly left. This scene was seen by Reynolds. He was both shocked and angry. "Father! Look, that little bitch Kadena actually took Ron away. F*ck him." Reynolds even cursed out the word bitch. It was obvious that his resentment towards Kadena was deep. It was an extreme hatred of love. But his father Ram did not say a word. He naturally saw Kadena take Ron away, but what could he do? This horrible and disgusting undead creature was too difficult to deal with. He simply could not be distracted. Kadena carried Ron on her back and ran. She knew in her heart that the only way to save Ron was to take him far away, the farther the better. As for Reynolds, Kadena sighed in her heart. She would slowly explain to him when the time came. Although Ron's body was not heavy, Kadena was also panting after running all the way. She was originally a magician with a weak body. Physical strength was not her strong point. Large beads of sweat slowly flowed down her beautiful face. Her physical strength was quickly consumed, but she was unaware. She clenched her teeth and persisted, running forward like a machine. However, Kadena could feel that Ron's breathing was getting weaker and weaker. Due to excessive blood loss, Ron had unknowingly fainted. The underground palace was full of twists and turns. She did not know how long she had run and did not know which path Kadena had walked to. She only saw her feet slip and a gudong sound was heard, as if she had stepped on some kind of mechanism. Kadena's body stagnated and she lost her balance. Together with Ron, they rolled down a long slope. After a while, the two of them finally rolled to the bottom of the slope. Kadena shook her head and combed her messy long hair. Battered and exhausted as she climbed up, she heard a gentle voice asking, "Are you all right?" It turned out that Ron had unknowingly woken up. A pair of bright black eyes were fixed on her, filled with joy and gratitude. "I'm fine." Kadena was touched. It was when she had rolled down the long slope that Ron, who had regained his consciousness, hugged her tightly and bore the majority of the impact. Otherwise, she wouldn't be in this state right now. "It's good that you're fine." Ron smiled weakly as he laid on the ground, unable to move at all. He carefully sized up the surroundings. This huge underground palace seems to have many levels. We seem to have rolled from one level to the next. Saying that, he paused and smiled. "Seems like we're all together with you." Kadena's nose turned sour. Ron was already injured to such an extent, but he still remembered her. Her face blushed red as she boldly walked closer. In the darkness, she gently pinched Ron's hand and said softly, "Perhaps this is fate." Fate! Ron's hand was being pinched by Kadena and his heart was thumping hard. But his eyes gradually became blurry and his mind was dizzy. "Kadena, you're really so beautiful. To be able to die with you, perhaps, is my life's greatest honor." Ron spoke intermittently. He didn't know what he was saying as his voice gradually became softer. Is this considered as a confession to me? But this confession seems to have come a little too late. Kadena's heart was also thumping hard as her beautiful face flushed hot. She bashfully said, "Ron, you're a very good person. Actually, I also have a good impression of you. If you had said this to me in the academy, perhaps I would have agreed to be with you. But now..." Kadena spoke quietly, but at this moment, Ron had completely stopped breathing. She lowered her head and saw that Ron's black robe was filled with bloodstains. He had also unknowingly fainted. Kadena was scared out of her wit. Ron, how are you? Wake up." Kadena desperately shook Ron's body, but Ron's entire body seemed to have lost consciousness as he didn't move an inch. At this moment, Kadena felt that there was something sticky in her hand. She lowered her head and saw Ron's black robe around his abdomen. Unknowingly, some liquid had flowed out. Under the faint light, she could vaguely identify that it was Ron's blood. Blood. It's black. Kadena slowly raised her hand and was shocked. He's been poisoned? Kadena finally remembered. When Ron and Ram were fighting, she had personally seen Ron being viciously stabbed by Ram's poisoned scorpion lion's tail. Needless to say, this poison was planted by Ram. Furthermore, Ron had been running all the way and didn't receive treatment in time. Now the poison had started to take effect. What should we do now? Kadena was suddenly at a loss. Although Ron was only unconscious now, with the spread of the poison, it might not be long before he. Ron, you must hold on. Kadena's tears immediately gushed out from her eyes. She didn't realize that since young, she had never been so nervous about a boy. What should we do? What should we do? As Ron's condition worsened, Kadena was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. She racked her brain and thought hard. Poison. That's right, I need to cure the poison first. That's right, I need to find an antidote. Kadena had a flash of inspiration and started rummaging through her own space bag. There's nothing. Kadena searched carefully and sat down weakly on the ground. She even took out her underwear but didn't see any antidote. She was secretly annoyed. Why did she bring a few bottles? This thing wasn't expensive. Great, now she didn't have it when she needed it. Just as Kadena was in despair, her gaze landed on the space bag at Ron's waist. Her eyes lit up. That's right, let's see if Ron has it. Fortunately, Ron's space bag contained a few bottles of antidote. Kadena was overjoyed. She picked up a bottle and carefully fed it to Ron. Ron opened his mouth unconsciously and the cold liquid slowly flowed down his throat. Chapter 485. As time passed, Kadena nervously looked at Ron, who had already drunk the antidote, but he was still unconscious. How could this be? Kadena was so shocked that her mouth was wide open. In her opinion, Ron should have recovered quickly after using the hydrotherapy to treat his injuries. But now, not only did his condition not improve, it worsened. Ron's breathing gradually became rapid. It's so hot. Kadena reached out to touch Ron's forehead, then frowned. He actually has a fever. What should we do? Looking at the unconscious Ron, Kadena was a little worried. Cold. At this time, Ron said in a daze. His hands involuntarily hugged his body, and his body curled into a ball. Cold? Kadena was shocked. She reached out and hugged Ron, only to see him struggle slightly with a pained expression on his face. Kadena felt that Ron's forehead was boiling hot, but his limbs and body were as cold as ice. Sleeping bag. Kadena immediately reacted and took out a thick, gorgeous sleeping bag from her portal bag. It was a necessary tool for survival in the wild, and also her personal belongings. It had never been touched by other men, but now she couldn't care less. The thick sleeping bag cushioned Ron's body, and the soft quilt covered Ron's body, but he was still shivering, his body curled up like a shrimp in the sleeping bag. It would be great if I could make a fire now, Kadena thought. She looked around, but the surroundings were empty and dark. Where could she find something to start a fire? At this time, Ron's condition was worsening. His body was constantly twitching and trembling, and his forehead was burning hot. What should we do? Kadena was a little out of her wits. If this situation continued, Ron would definitely be in trouble. The dark underground palace was very quiet, and only the sound of water dripping from the ceiling could be heard. Kadena sat beside Ron, her expression changing, as if she was thinking about something. This is the only way. Looking at Ron's pained face, Kadena sighed, as if she had made up her mind. She steeled her heart, and her trembling hand reached for the noble and beautiful blue magic robe on her body. In the darkness, the blue robe was slowly removed, revealing a beautiful and perfect body, which made people not dare to look directly at it. Kadena lay on Ron's body, her long blue hair gently draped over Ron's body like a beautiful waterfall, and Kadena used her hot body to warm Ron's cold body. At this moment, Kadena's face was boiling hot like fire. She had always kept her chastity. She had never been so close to a man, even if it was her fiancé, Reynolds. The manly scent on Ron's body intoxicated her, and her breathing quickened. Resisting her shyness, Kadena gently covered herself with the quilt, and her whole body was tightly pressed against Ron's chest. Ron's cold aura made her shiver, but she didn't move away. On the contrary, she hugged Ron even tighter. Her trembling hand slightly reached out, and gently stroked Ron's not-so-handsome face. In the darkness, Kadena's soft sigh could be heard. Ron, although I don't know why I'm doing this, I know what I'm doing. Moreover, I believe that I won't regret it. Kadena's head drooped down, and her boiling hot cheeks gently pressed against Ron's cold chest. She whispered, Ron, perhaps the gods in heaven allowed us to meet. It was a beautiful mistake. Tonight, I, Princess Kadena Yulon Doro, will become your woman. Ron, no matter where I am, my heart will always belong to you. After speaking, Kadena held Ron's cheeks, lightly opened her red lips, and kissed the most precious first kiss in her life. Unknowingly, Ron's body stopped trembling, and his whole person became calm. In the dark and enormous underground palace, two young hearts were unceasingly moving. However, Kadena didn't notice that the seemingly calm Ron's body was undergoing earth-shattering changes. The biggest change was in his soul. In his sea of consciousness, Ron's soul was frantically operating, absorbing all the energy that could be absorbed. That ocean-like soul force was unceasingly churning, just like a pot of boiling water. His sea of consciousness was already unable to hold so much soul force, and began to rapidly expand. Ron's soul was still in a deep sleep, and he didn't seem to notice the changes in his surroundings. But at this moment, the changes had already begun. Boom! A powerful soul force was pulled high up in the air, and like a water dragon rising from the sea, it lightly coiled around the black sphere of light floating in the air. As more and more water dragons poured in, the black sphere of light became brighter and brighter. The crystal wall became clearer and clearer, revealing Ron's sleeping true appearance. That was his truest soul, his only source of power. The enormous whirlpool in the sky seemed to have been activated, and crazily revolved, resonating with the water dragon in his sea of consciousness. A light green energy penetrated the horizon, and directly penetrated Ron's soul. Ron's soul began to expand, expanding to an extremely large size. Due to the excessive power, Ron's soul began to show a painful expression. Gotcha! At some unknown time, a crack finally appeared on the thick crystal wall, and as expected, the crack became bigger and bigger. Traces of soul force slowly seeped through the crack. At this moment, the painful expression on Ron's face became even more intense, causing his whole body to tremble. Kadena, who was in a deep sleep, sensed his abnormality and woke up with a start. Looking at Ron, who seemed to be enduring extreme pain, she jumped in fright. Ron, how are you? Kadena anxiously said. She suddenly sat up, and her thick pants slid down her body, revealing her perfect and smooth back. Ron finally couldn't bear it and let out a painful howl. This kind of pain didn't come from the physical body, but from the depths of his soul. Ron, wake up. Don't scare me. Kadena gently patted Ron's cheeks, so anxious that tears fell down. In the depths of his sea of consciousness, Ron's soul was enduring hellish torment. This kind of pain was unbearable for ordinary people, and directly reflected on his body. This was the most painful time, just like the darkness before dawn, and also like a woman in labor. When all of this passed, it would be the arrival of Guangming and happiness. Pornographic novels. This was the most crucial moment, because Ron was finally about to break through. Boom! With a loud sound, Ron's body fiercely shook. In his sea of consciousness, it was as if something had been broken. Soul force that was 10 times stronger than before, no, 100 times stronger, poured out of his sea of consciousness, gradually forming a new sea of consciousness. At the same time, Ron's soul also began to strengthen, unceasingly expanding, and expanding. Countless rivers formed beautiful streams, finally converging into the sea. At this time, the turbulent sea water finally calmed down, and the soul force gradually condensed, Advanced Grand Magus Necromancer. The current Ron already possessed the soul force of a Grand Magus Necromancer. Although he still hadn't practiced the necromancy magic of a Grand Magus Necromancer, he already had the qualifications to practice it. While unconscious, Ron had unknowingly broken through. Even he didn't know about all of this. To him, the whole thing was just like a dream. And he still hadn't woken up from his dream. The frantic Ron finally calmed down and his breathing became gentle, just like a sleeping child. His face revealed a happy expression. Seeing this, Kadena finally let out a sigh of relief. She touched Ron's forehead. Although the fever hadn't subsided, it was already much better than before. What happened just now? Ron seemed to have gone crazy. His strength also became extremely unstable. Is this a symptom of fainting? Kadena thought for a while, but couldn't understand. She shook her head. Forget it, there's no use thinking about things that you can't understand. It's fine as long as he's fine. There was no day or night in the dark underground palace. No one knew when the day would come. After an unknown amount of time, Ron finally opened his eyes. He quietly sized up everything around him. That's right, it was still the same underground palace. It was the place where he had fallen unconscious. They were still not out of danger. At this time, Ron sensitively discovered something. He was shocked. This is Kadena's blanket? Where's Kadena? Ron turned his head to look around, but couldn't see Kadena's figure. His heart grew anxious. He wanted to get up, but he heard a moaning sound coming from his pants. His pants were pulled open, revealing a peerlessly beautiful face. This face was filled with joy. Ron, you're finally awake. Kadena? Why are you here? Ron was shocked. At this time, he discovered that there was something strange about his body. Kadena was actually not wearing anything. Don't move. Thinking of her embarrassing state, Kadena couldn't help but blush. If Ron were to pull open the blanket now, then she would be completely naked. It didn't matter if she was unconscious, but when facing Ron, she really wanted to find a hole to hide in. You. This goddess who had always been in his heart, was really lying naked on top of him. Other than being stupefied, Ron couldn't say anything. What are you doing to me? Kadena blushed and rolled her eyes at him. She coquettishly said, Isn't it because you fainted? Not long after, you had a high fever and kept saying that you were cold. If you didn't confess to me first, this princess would be too lazy to care about your life and death. When Kadena said this, Ron understood everything. However, he still didn't understand. Confess? When did I confess to you? Good. You took advantage of me and now you're making sarcastic remarks. When Kadena heard this, she was embarrassed and angry. Her tears flowed down. Like a tigress, she pounced on Ron and fiercely pinched his neck. Watch this princess choke you to death. Ah, no. Ron naturally shouted for help. However, he didn't expect that Kadena wasn't wearing any clothes. As the two were arguing, her pants slipped down. Kadena's beautiful naked body was completely exposed in front of Ron. Ron's eyes were straight. What are you looking at? You're not allowed to look. Kadena used her pants to wrap her body. She was ashamed and sad. A feeling of being deceived filled her heart. Her eyes turned red and tears fell down in a daze. Ron naturally remembered what he said to Kadena before he fainted. He only said that to tease her. In his heart, Kadena's shadow had already appeared. At this time, Kadena felt her body being hugged tightly. She turned her head and saw that Ron had already moved closer. Let go of me, you bad guy. And Kadena's fist kept pounding on Ron's chest. However, in the next moment, she couldn't say anything. Her soft lips were sealed. Ron wantonly tasted her sweet tongue in his mouth. Kadena stopped struggling. Her body gradually softened. Her pretty face was filled with joy. Happy tears gently flowed out from the corners of her eyes. Chapter 486. The two of them tossed and turned on the ground. Under the thick quilt, the two young bodies were constantly shaking, enjoying the most wonderful pleasure in the world. After an unknown amount of time, the quilt finally calmed down. Kadena lay in Ron's arms with a happy face. Her slender jade-like hands were gently wrapped around his waist, and her white and tender fingers were constantly drawing circles on his chest. Ron gently embraced the goddess in his heart, and his heart was filled with emotions. He smiled and said, "Kadena, right now I feel like I'm in a dream. I can't believe the reality in front of me." "You're so bad." Kadena blushed and reached out to hit him. After a while, she said faintly, "To be honest, I don't know how I fell in love with you, but I believe in my own feelings. When we were in the academy, you were modest, low-key, and powerful. Most importantly, the way you looked at me was not as scary as the other stinky men. So at that time, I already had a good impression of you." "At that time," Ron smiled, as if he was immersed in his memories, "you were a goddess in the limelight and your every move was watched. I was just a poor little necromancer. How could I be worthy of you? Did you know? A lot of boys were proud to say a word to you. Maybe it's because I know it's impossible between us, so I can maintain a calm state of mind when facing you." Ron looked at her and said with a smile, "If I were like those stinky men you mentioned, would you like me? You want to try?" Kadena playfully pinched Ron's nose and then leaned on his chest. "No matter what, I love you. This will never change." Ron was moved, but he asked jokingly, "You don't want your dragon knight anymore?" Kadena shook her head in Ron's arms, then raised her head and said embarrassedly, "This is just a dream of mine when I was young. Now that I've grown up, I don't think like that anymore." Then she giggled. "You're not jealous, are you?" Ron smiled and said nothing. Kadena's hand drew circles on Ron's chest once again. "In short, Ron, I'm determined to follow you. Who told me to fall in love with you? After returning to Doro Kingdom, I will propose to annul the engagement with my father. Anyway, I've already given you everything. Reynolds won't want me anymore." Looking at the blood below him, Ron was extremely moved. He held Kadena's face, kissed her passionately, and said softly, "Kadena, I love you. No matter what happens, I will face it with you." Kadena lowered her head and smiled embarrassedly. Then, she raised her head and said with a sly look in her eyes, "You said the same thing to Sister Shea, right?" When Ron heard this, his face was full of embarrassment. "You know about this too? Who are you trying to fool? I've long known about the relationship between you two." Kadena curled her lips in dissatisfaction. Then, she smiled, "But I don't care, as long as you have me in your heart." The two of them passionately kissed each other for a while before reluctantly climbing out of the sleeping bag. After putting on their clothes, they stood in a corner of the underground palace. Suddenly, Ron made a sound of surprise. His tone was full of joy. "What's wrong?" Kadena became nervous. She was worried that the poison in Ron's body hadn't been completely removed. Gently closing his eyes, Ron quietly felt the slow flow of his soul force. At this moment, his soul force was more than 10 times stronger than before. His sea of consciousness was like an endless treasury. Powerful soul force came out of his body, and a steady power filled his heart. I actually broke through." Ron opened his eyes with an expression of disbelief. "How is this possible? What? You broke through?" Kadena was surprised and happy at the same time. "When? Could it be that you were unconscious?" "It should be." After the initial ecstasy, Ron finally calmed down. He looked at his hand in disbelief and muttered, "I broke through, and I didn't even notice it." "Ron, what is your strength now?" Kadena asked happily. Nothing made her happier than her lover's strength increasing. "Advanced Grand Magus Necromancer. That is equivalent to Advanced Master rank." Pornographic novels. Ron thought for a while and said, "Advanced Master rank?" When Kadena heard this, she was even more surprised. Her surprise was mixed with joy. "Ron, you're really amazing. You're so young and you're already at advanced master rank. You almost reached the sacred domain." Almost. Ron couldn't help but smile bitterly. From advanced master rank to the sacred domain, how could it be as simple as almost? Many people stopped at that almost for their entire lives. Kadina's eyes were filled with little stars as she looked at Ron with admiration. A 21-year-old master rank expert. Other than magical beasts and higher races with great talent, there was no one else like him among humans. If he could step into the sacred domain in a few years, he would be a genius among geniuses. Kadina tilted her head and looked at Ron for a while. "But I don't seem to have noticed any changes in your strength?" Ron smiled faintly, his twinkling eyes filled with confidence. A necromancer's greatest strength isn't their strength, but their strange necromancy magic. Ron didn't leave immediately. Instead, he sat down and sent his consciousness into his soul ring. He wanted to learn the advanced necromancy magic that Homelin had left for him, such as mist concealment, pierce, bone cage, and so on. Without these advanced necromancy magic, it was like having a huge treasure trove that hadn't been opened. Seeing that Ron had entered cultivation mode, Kadina could only sit down and wait. Ron was cultivating with his eyes closed, his expression focused. His determined face had sharp edges and corners, causing Kadina to be dazed for a moment. After an unknown period of time, a series of hurried footsteps could be heard in the quiet and dark underground palace, causing Kadina to suddenly wake up. "Who's there?" "Haha, so you're here. We've been looking for you for a long time." An angry voice could be heard in the darkness, echoing throughout the underground palace. "Renaud?" Kadina's mouth was wide open, her beautiful face filled with shock. Renaud slowly walked out from the dark underground palace, his face full of hatred. Behind him was Ram, who was riding a poisoned scorpion lion. Kadina stood up, not knowing what to do. She hurriedly picked up the azure magic staff by her feet. Don't come over." Ron's eyes were still closed. He didn't care about his surroundings and was still immersed in cultivation. Renaud's face was ashen as he approached with a sinister expression. He grabbed Kadina's pure white wrist and asked sternly, "Kadina, what the hell do you want?" I. Kadina averted her gaze, avoiding Renaud's eyes. Suddenly, she made up her mind. "Renaud, let's break off the engagement. We're not compatible at all." "What did you say? Do you have the guts to say it again?" Renaud flew into a rage when he heard this. He pointed at Kadina and shouted loudly. At this moment, Kadina calmed down. "Renaud, no matter what you say, I've already made up my mind." With that, she lowered her head and looked at Ron, who was in the midst of cultivation. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tenderness. "I love him. I've already given everything to him. Renaud, let's break up." Looking at the sleeping bag on the floor and the messy clothes on the floor, Renaud understood everything. A surge of hot blood rushed to his head, causing him to almost faint from anger. Jealousy, anger, unwillingness, all kinds of negative emotions gnawed at Renaud's heart. He jumped up in rage. "You bitch!" Slap, a loud slap sounded. Kadina was slapped in the face. Renaud had lost control and hit Kadina hard. She fell to the ground, blood seeping from the corner of her mouth. She gently caressed her aching cheek, a faint smile still on her face. "It's useless. Renaud, the one I love is not you. It's him. I'm going to kill you." Renaud was almost mad with anger. Swish! He pulled out a sword from his space bag and ruthlessly stabbed at Kadina. "You can kill me, but you can't hurt him." Kadina didn't dodge. She only smiled faintly and stubbornly stood there, watching the sword piercing her chest. She was very beautiful, so beautiful that it made one's heart break. The moment the tip of the sword touched her body, Kadina gently closed her eyes. At this critical moment, Ron suddenly opened his eyes. His pitch-black eyes shot out a burst of light. Boom! Renault's body flew up like a kite with a broken string and landed heavily on the ground. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Ron, you're finally awake. Kadena opened her eyes. Seeing Ron, her face was filled with joy. Like a happy little bird, she quickly threw herself into Ron's arms. Ron nodded and said with a smile, "I'm all right." "You..." Renault climbed up in a sorry state, pointing his finger at Ron and trembling. Just now, he was seriously injured. At this moment, his eyes were full of astonishment. He suddenly realized that Ron's strength had significantly increased. Ron smiled and stared at Renault, his gaze cold. "Kadena is my woman. You're not allowed to touch her in the future." I. Suppressed by Ron's imposing manner, Renault was actually tongue-tied and unable to speak. "What do you think, Lord Ram?" Ron's tone changed, and his gaze swept towards the sacred domain powerhouse, venomous manticore knight Ram, who was standing to the side. Ram had been quietly watching from the side, rarely intervening. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't. He had fought a big battle with the hate warrior and had consumed a lot of energy. Unlike Ron, this terrifying undead creature wasn't afraid of poison, which gave Ram a huge headache. Although he had succeeded in killing it, he and his venomous manticore knight had also been injured. It was precisely because Ron saw this that he provoked him. Ron, whose strength had greatly increased, was full of confidence. As a high-level Grand Magus Necromancer, even if he couldn't defeat a powerhouse from the sacred domain, he was confident that he could escape unscathed. If he was lucky, he might even be able to kill this heavily injured powerhouse from the sacred domain. Therefore, Ron was awe-inspiring and fearless. In the face of Ron's provocation, Ram fell into a rare silence. However, at this moment, he had no way out. With a slight movement of his right hand, Ram slowly drew his sword. He looked at Kadena and calmly said, "Kadena, I had always thought highly of the two of you, but you have really disappointed me. To think that I treated you like my own daughter when you were young." Kadena fell silent and lowered her head. After a while, she said, "Uncle Ram, I'm sorry." Ram waved his hand indifferently. "There's nothing to be sorry about. Since you have already made your choice, then the fate of you and Ron has long been decided. That is, death." Kadena's face revealed a bitter smile, but there was a trace of determination in her eyes. "Even if I die, I will die together with him." Ron laughed out loud. "It's too early to say that. It's still not certain who will be the one to kill who. Lord Ram, how much battle strength can you exert with your heavily injured body?" "Kill you. That's enough," Ram said calmly, his eyes shooting out a fierce killing intent. Chapter 487. Ron. Kadena's eyes were filled with worry. Ron reached out his hand slightly and stopped her from saying what she was about to say. He said in an unquestionable voice, "Don't worry, I won't lose." Kadena's smile was like 100 flowers blooming in the dark. Even Reynolds was mesmerized by her. She said softly, "I just want to tell you that if you die, I won't live either. In a world without you, there's no meaning for me to live alone." Kadena's words caused ripples in Ron's heart. Reynolds, on the other hand, was filled with jealousy. He glared at Ron with hatred. Drip, drip, drip. Above their heads, water droplets condensed from stalactites fell to the ground, forming small puddles. The atmosphere between the two was suffocating. In the dark underground palace, one's vision was easily limited. However, Ron, who was used to the darkness, and Ram, a sacred domain expert, could see everything clearly. Reynolds kept laughing coldly. He was laughing at Ron for overestimating himself and trying to challenge his father, a sacred domain expert. Ram, however, was not as optimistic as he thought he would be when facing Ron. He felt that Ron was different, but he could not pinpoint what was different about him. A pure white water droplet gradually condensed. It seemed to be unable to bear its own weight and fell to the ground. Drip, drip, drip. A faint ripple appeared on the water droplet. At this moment, Ram suddenly moved. He waved the sword in his hand and charged forward on the poisoned scorpion lion. As a sacred domain expert, he actually took the initiative to attack. Ron did not show any signs of weakness. He raised the legendary staff and a powerful soul energy surged out. Black gas surrounded his body and his eyes turned green. Swoosh! A white light flashed, and an abnormally pure white bone spear formed in the air. The sharp tip of the spear shone coldly in the darkness. This was no longer the bone spear, but its upgraded version, the bone spear. As a high-level Grand Magus necromancer, Ron had finally touched upon the mysteries of high-level necromancy magic, white bone necromancy magic. This was also the reason why he had spent so much time practicing. Compared to the bone spear, the white bone spear had a stronger penetrating and destructive power. The soul power wrapped around the tip of the spear was even denser. Flame shield. Ram took a deep breath. The sword in his hand was as red as a soldering iron. The tip of the sword drew a beautiful arc, and the flames on his body flowed. Vaguely, a huge steel-like shield appeared around him, shining brightly in the raging flames. Just as the flame shield was formed, the white bone spear had already arrived. With a loud boom, sparks flew everywhere. The white bone spear actually caused a huge explosion after being thrown out. Even though his defense was successful, Ram had also suffered a hidden loss. His expression was extremely ugly as he roared and launched a counterattack. Terror Knight. As Ram rapidly approached, Ron didn't dare to be negligent. He summoned his strongest defense, the Terror Knight, to block in front of him. At the same time, his figure rapidly retreated, pulling away from Ram. The white bone spear once again appeared in his hand, and he quickly threw it at Ram. "It's this thing again." Seeing the white bone spear flying at him again, Ram secretly complained. This thing's power was extremely strong, and even he had to be careful when dealing with it. With a wave of the long sword in his hand, the white bone spear was shattered. After blocking Ron's attack, Ram's brows slightly creased. Because he had used too much strength just now, it had affected his previous injury. At this moment, Ram felt a faint pain in his chest. Clenching his teeth, Ram could only force himself to endure. He couldn't let Ron see that he was injured, but his actions still betrayed him. Ron's eyes were extremely sharp. He had already seen that Ram's injury was serious, otherwise he wouldn't have provoked him. At this moment, he completely relaxed and threw himself into the fierce battle. His battle experience was extremely rich. The Terror Knight blocked in front, the white bone spear attacked from behind, and relying on his nimble body to constantly change his position. With a swing of his attack, he actually had the upper hand, beating the injured Ram to a miserable state. The power of bone magic was strong, but the consumption of soul power was incomparable. Ron only practiced two bone magic, white bone spear, and white bone shield. One was focused on attack, and the other was focused on defense. They were used with ease, but not long after, his soul power was depleted. Ron's mind was dizzy. What? It's depleted so quickly? Only now did he realize that his soul power had been used up. At this moment, the whirlpool above Ron's soul began to spin faster, and a steady flow of soul power slowly seeped out. This made Ron's heart tremble. At this critical moment, the soul ring was still the most reliable. Whoosh! Ram endured the pain and cut off the Terror Knight's entire right shoulder. At this moment, only half of the Terror Knight's body was left, and its fighting strength was greatly reduced. Just as Lam heaved a sigh of relief, a light cyan ball of light suddenly shot towards him. However, the target wasn't him, but the undead creature with the defensive power of a knight. The cyan ball of light hit him from behind. Ram was slightly startled. What's going on? Before Ram could react, the undead creature, like a knight in front of him, suddenly became spirited. The right arm that had been cut off grew back, and it was as good as new. Damn it! Ram couldn't help but curse fiercely in his heart. These undead creatures were indeed extraordinarily difficult to deal with. The battle quickly entered a white-hot state. Ron had the upper hand, and Ram's momentum was completely suppressed. Space was constantly being compressed, and the entire situation was in the palm of Ron's hand. This is a good chance I must kill him. Thinking about how Ram had repeatedly caused trouble for him, and even wanted to kill him, Ron's heart burned with anger, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. Taking advantage of Ram's entanglement with the Terror Knight, Ron's thoughts moved, and a white bone spear appeared out of thin air, floating in the air. However, his other hand reached behind his back, and with a flash, another white bone spear appeared in his palm. Kadena originally wanted to help Ron, but found that she couldn't do anything at all. She could only retreat to the side, but when she saw the scene in front of her, her mouth was wide open, and her face was filled with disbelief. Since when did Ron have the ability to match a powerhouse of the sacred domain? Compared to Ron, Ram was clearly not as strong as he wanted to be. Every time he used his strength, his injuries would be aggravated, and he couldn't use his full strength to fight. He could only rely on the poison manticore under him to deal with the surging undead creatures. Unfortunately, the poison manticore's battle strength was limited, and under the attack of a sea of undead creatures, his already injured body was even more injured. "Father, you must defeat him. I want to tear him to pieces with my own hands," Renaud shouted from the side, his eyes shining with the light of revenge. He didn't realize that the situation was disadvantageous for his father, and in his impression, his powerful father couldn't possibly lose. Moreover, the opponent was Ron, who wasn't even at the sacred domain's level. Ram had just forced the Terror Knight back with great difficulty when he suddenly heard the sound of wind behind his ear. Turning around, he saw that terrifying white bone spear flying towards him again. Annoying thing. Ram once again entered a defensive posture, and several flame shields appeared around his body, forcibly blocking the attack. Boom! The white bone spear exploded, and waves of black smoke spread out, filling the surrounding space and blocking Ram's vision. Shing! It sounded like the tip of a sword cutting through flesh. Ram only felt a sharp pain in his waist. He looked down and saw that a white spear had suddenly appeared in his abdomen, piercing deeply into his flesh. What he saw was Ron's hate-filled eyes. Bastard! It wasn't that Ram hadn't been injured before, but ever since he became a member of the sacred domain, he had never been injured by anyone below the sacred domain. At this moment, he was unable to restrain his anger. "Kid, you're courting death." Ram gritted his teeth, and his eyes became fiery red. Then, a powerful flame energy exploded from his body, like a huge fireball, and even the surrounding space burned fiercely. Fire domain. Heaven burning flames. Ron actually forced Ram to use his domain. The powerful fire domain spread out, occupying the entire space in an instant, and the blazing flames continued to spread to the surroundings. Not good, this guy is using a domain. Ron saw that the situation was not good, and his figure quickly retreated, covering his head and fleeing in a sorry state. Not good, it's a domain, run. Kadena was a little further away, and in the blink of an eye, the powerful fire elemental energy was in front of her, and a wave of heat hit her face. Her reaction was fast, and she quickly used teleport to escape. Boom! 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 The narrow passage of the underground palace was burned red, and countless stalactites melted, falling down, and the whole ground began to collapse. In just a moment, the Terror Knight, who was known for his defense, was turned into ashes, and not even a trace of him was left. However, Ram did not have it easy either. The domain that he forcibly supported was not enough to kill Ron, and at the same time, his injuries began to worsen. Pornographic novel. At this time, Ron's figure appeared, quietly floating in the air. Looking at the destruction in front of his eyes, he let out a sigh of relief. It seems that I still can't kill him. Facing the powerful ram, Ron could not help but shake his head and sigh. It just so happened that he had broken through to become a high-level Grand Magus Necromancer, and at the same time, Ram was seriously injured. This was a very good opportunity, but unfortunately, the powerhouses of the sacred domain were much stronger than him, and it would not be so easy to kill him. The corner of Ron's mouth twitched a few times, and he said in a clear voice, "Lord Ram's strength is indeed powerful. Ron has already experienced it. I will take my leave now." Although Ron wanted to kill this ram, he felt that the time was not right, so he made a prompt decision and decisively chose to escape. "Kadena, let's go." Ron's staff flashed, and he used a high-level necromancy spell, Mist Concealment. His body turned into a cloud of mist, and like a giant black snake, it rolled wildly. The giant black snake was as fast as lightning as it rolled towards Kadena, who was standing at the side, and carried her away, disappearing in the blink of an eye. At this time, Ron's strength had reached an inconceivable level. In a battle with a powerhouse of the sacred domain, he had actually seriously injured him, and then retreated unscathed. Although Ram was injured, this was not something that just anyone could do. With the strength of a master, seriously injuring a powerhouse of the sacred domain, this in itself was a miracle. Ron's battle results were glorious. Unexpectedly, Ram did not chase after him. On the contrary, he rejoiced in his heart. If they had continued fighting, who knew what the result would have been? At this time, he frowned, and a piercing pain came from his abdomen. He looked down and saw that the blood seeping out had dyed his thick armor red. Chapter 488. Father, why didn't you kill him? You actually let him escape. Reynolds angrily walked over. Father, quickly chase after him and kill him. This guy stole my woman, I must tear him to pieces. Lay Wasteland, who was muddled with anger and hatred, didn't realize his father's predicament and shouted at him. Ram didn't move. Not to mention catching up, even if he did, he might not have a chance of winning against Ron with his heavily injured body, unless he recovered from his injuries. Shut up! Facing Reynolds' unruly roar, Ram couldn't bear it and sternly shouted. Reynolds jumped in fright. Seeing his father's angry face, he resentfully shut his mouth. Ram coldly stared at Reynolds. If you didn't speak, no one would treat you as a mute. Master rank. High rank. Looking at the scorched black hole, Ram inwardly calculated Ron's strength. At this moment, a trace of graveness appeared in his eyes. This kid grows so fast. Ram slightly sucked in a breath of cold air. His eyes revealed a trace of severity. Next time, I definitely won't allow him to live in this world. The mist concealment spell was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he had escaped far away. The necromancy magic of a high-ranked Grand Magus Necromancer was not to be trifled with. Pornographic novels, Ron, you're really amazing. Kadena quietly laid in Ron's embrace. Her pair of big, sparkling blue eyes looked at Ron. Her eyes were full of admiration. She knew how difficult it was to escape from the sacred domain experts. Ron faintly smiled and lowered his head to kiss her forehead. You're drawing a clear line between you and them now? Kadena lowered her head and softly said, I'll go back and tell my father about the matter of breaking off the engagement with Reynolds. Although she said that, Kadena didn't have any assurance in her heart. At this moment, Ron's heart was greatly alarmed. Behind him, a huge fireball fell from the sky and a blazing heat rushed towards him. Be careful! Kadena cried out in alarm. Ron was shocked. He had no time to think about it. With a thought, a black gas surrounded him. Bone shield. As the black gas swam, a huge white shield nearly 2 meters tall suddenly appeared behind Ron. Boom! The bone shield shattered into countless fragments as dust billowed. The powerful impact caused Ron to stagger, and the two of them heavily fell to the ground. Ron, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Kadena hurriedly got up and helped Ron up. I'm fine. Ron scrambled to his feet in a sorry state. The defensive power of bone necromancy magic was extremely strong, and he had only suffered light injuries. Kadena looked around and said angrily, "Who's attacking us? How shameless!" Hee, you didn't die from that? Ron, you're really lucky. As soon as Kadena's voice fell, a faint voice was heard. At the same time, a figure slowly walked out from a dark corner. The expert of the dragons, Ranarier of the Fire Dragon tribe, was slowly walking out. He narrowed his eyes and sized up the two of them as if they were prey. It's you. Seeing the person, Kadena's eyes widened, and Ron sucked in a breath of cold air. This was the enemy he didn't want to meet the most. That's right, it's me. Ranarier smiled and gracefully bowed to Kadena. Beautiful lady, I didn't think we'd meet again. Ron looked around calmly, his heart sinking to the bottom. He asked in a low voice, Ranarier, why are you here? Where's Delin? Hee, you're still counting on that level 15 magical beast to come and save you? Ranarier's eyes showed a trace of ridicule, the corner of his mouth twitched a few times. Unfortunately, your hopes were dashed. He paused for a moment. Ever since you fell, that level 15 magical beast didn't listen to me and insisted on walking on its own. Later on, the team disbanded and went their separate ways. As for me, by chance I actually met you here. Ranarier smiled, a trace of murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Seems like this is heaven's will. Ranarier didn't want to admit that he was also lost. The paths in the huge underground palace were complicated and his childhood memory was completely useless. Just when he was like a headless fly, he happened to meet Ron, who had just escaped from Ram's hands. Ron's somewhat flustered heart gradually calmed down. He had experienced many storms and waves. He already knew that when danger came, fear was useless. It would only make him die faster. Only calm. Calm was the only way out. Even if the final result was death, he couldn't die in chaos and fear. What do you want? Ron asked. Kill you. Ranarier answered without hesitation. Ron was speechless. After a long time he asked, Can you give me a real reason? Since you're not sent by Firth Ra, then we shouldn't have any reason to be hostile. Ron paused and said calmly, Even if I die, I want to die with a clear understanding. No comment. Ranarier still refused. You just need to die, you don't need to understand. And you don't have the right to know. How can you be like this? Hearing this, Kadena couldn't help but interrupt. You're a dragon, Ron is a human. There's nothing to do with you. Moreover, he didn't offend you. Why do you have to kill him? Don't tell me you don't need a reason? Of course, there was a reason, but Ranarier didn't want to say it. However, since Kadena asked, Ranarier, who always cared about his face, couldn't refuse. He looked around carefully. After confirming that there was no one around, he smiled and nodded. Since you want to know the reason, I'll tell you. You can die with a clear understanding. Anyway, no one here can save you. Hearing Ranarier's words, Ron listened quietly. He wasn't afraid of death, but he was afraid of dying without knowing why. Ranarier glanced at Kadena. Just now, you said that I have nothing to do with him. That's wrong. Ron is also a dragon. His mother is the Dark Wyvern Bellis, and Bellis is the daughter of the Dark Wyvern Ra Firth Ra. In other words, Ron should be the grandson of the clan leader. What? Kadena was shocked. She looked at Ron dumbfoundedly and said, Ron, you're actually a dragon? Ron already knew about this. He smiled and said to Kadena, I have a dragon mother, but I was born as a human. Moreover, I was abandoned. I never had any identity as a dragon. So that's how it is. Your father is a human. Kadena suddenly understood. Ron was born as a dragon, but he had a human father and gave birth to a human son. The difference in bloodline between humans and dragons was too great. They were destined to walk different paths from the moment they were born. Many of the higher races of magical beasts forbade intermarriage with humans. This was because they didn't want to give birth to descendants with extremely low talent. A human with the identity of a dragon sounded like a comedy, but it was actually a tragedy. So it's like this. Ron nodded and then asked, It is said that ever since I was born, Firth Ra saw me as a disgrace, so… You were ordered by him to kill me? Ron didn't have a good impression of this person who called him grandfather, so he immediately called him by his name. If it was someone else who called the clan leader by his name, Ranarier would definitely be furious. However, Ron could also be considered as half a dragon, so there was nothing wrong with calling him that. Besides, it was normal for people who were about to die to have some resentment. Ranarier smiled. No. We dragons also have branches. Like what happened to you, whether it was a disgrace or not, that's the family matter of the Black Dragon clan. It has nothing to do with me. Even if I want to kill you, it's not my turn to do it. Ron was even more confused when he heard this. Then why? Kadena was even more curious. She pricked up her ears and listened with a serious face. Ranarier hesitated for a moment and finally said, Because you are the fiancé of the fairy dragon Frigga. What? Fairy dragon? Ron was stunned. Although he was nominally a dragon, he had never returned to Dragon Island, let alone know what a fairy dragon was. Wait. Kadena was completely shocked by this explosive news. She stuttered, You? The fairy dragon you are talking about. Could it be? The Parliament of the Noah Continent's Parliament. Lord Speaker? That's right. Ranarier's eyes flashed with a trace of passion, and his face was full of adoration. She is Frigga, the most powerful woman in the Noah Continent. She is beautiful, noble, powerful, sacred, and inviolable. She is the world's #1 beauty, beautiful dragon. She is also my, Ranarier's, destined woman. He glanced at Ron and said coldly, Only I have the right to have her. You human, you are not worthy of her at all. What kind of reason was this? Ron didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He took a deep breath and said calmly, Lord Ranarier, I think you must have made a mistake. Lord Speaker is indeed a beauty, but this seems to have nothing to do with me. I have heard of her name, but I have never even seen her in person. To Ron, this was definitely a huge injustice. If it was true, he would have admitted it. However, he had never even seen the person before, yet he had planted the name of a fiancé. This black calamity was on his back. The Speaker of the Parliament of the Noah Continent, Fairy Dragon Frigga, was like the moon in the sky, while he was like a blade of grass on the ground. The difference in status between the two was too great, and this gap was insurmountable. Yes, Lord Ranarier, you must have made a mistake. Kadena also said, Fairy Dragon Frigga is Ron's fiancée. How is this possible? With such a character, it is impossible for her to fall in love with Ron. There is no mistake. This is true. Ranarier's face darkened. Frigga rejected my proposal personally. The reason was that she had been betrothed to Aunt Bellis's lost son, Moody, which is you. The human who changed his name to Ron. This was a joke when she was young, but until now, Frigga has admitted that you are her fiancé. What? Not only Ron, but even Kadena was shocked. This was simply too absurd. So, Ron, you must die today. Ranarier's eyes were full of murderous intent, and he took a step forward. I will never allow. any factor that hinders me from being with Frigga. Whether you are or not, this is your destiny. After hearing the ins and outs of the matter, Ron could only complain in his heart, Frigga. Frigga, you have really King harmed me. Achoo. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.